The second cake rolled into my wedding reception before my husband and I had even cut the first one. Across the white frosting, in gold script big enough for half the ballroom to read, were 3 words. She said yes. My younger sister, Brittany, pressed both hands to her mouth and gasped like she had no idea what was happening. My mother was already standing with her phone raised and recording. My father turned toward Brittany's boyfriend, Ryan, reached into his jacket, and pressed a small velvet ring box into his hand. Ryan stared at the box, then looked at me, then at my sister. He never got down on one knee. Instead, he closed the box and said, loud enough for the closest tables to hear, "I was going to propose until I found out what you did to your sister. My name is Aaron Wallace, and this happened at my wedding a few months ago. Though there are moments from that night I can still replay more clearly than things that happened yesterday. Before I tell you what Ryan discovered, I hope you're doing well wherever you're listening from, because what looked like a stolen wedding moment turned out to be the first crack in something my family had been living inside for years. Stay with me, because the cake was only the beginning, and the thing that eventually shocked me most wasn't what my sister had done. If stories about family secrets, betrayal, and finally drawing the line are your kind of stories, please subscribe to the channel and stay with us for the rest of this one. For about 3 seconds after Ryan spoke, nobody moved. Then the applause that had started when the cake appeared simply died. Not faded. Died. A few people still had their hands half raised as if they had forgotten what they were doing. My aunt at the table nearest the dance floor looked from Ryan to Brittany and then directly at me. One of Daniel's cousins lowered his champagne glass without taking a sip. Even the banquet server who had been steering the cake cart stopped with both hands still wrapped around the handle. I remember all of that because my brain did something strange in that moment. Instead of panicking, it started inventorying the room. Brittany's expression changed first. The wide-eyed surprise she had been performing disappeared so fast that if I had blinked, I might have missed it. Her hands came down from her mouth. Her shoulders stiffened. She stared at Ryan, not like a woman whose boyfriend had just ruined a surprise proposal, but like someone trying to calculate how much another person knew. Mom lowered her phone a few inches. Dad's face tightened. Daniel stepped closer to me, but he didn't touch me until I reached for his hand. "Ryan," Brittany said, forcing a laugh that sounded brittle even over the music. "What are you talking about?" Ryan didn't answer her immediately. My mother did. She looked straight at me. "Aaron, what happened?" That told me more than she probably intended. Ryan had just accused Brittany of doing something to me, yet Mom's first instinct was to ask what I had done to create the situation. "I don't know," I said. Brittany turned toward me. "Did you say something to him?" "No, because this is insane." "I agree." Dad moved closer to Ryan. "You two need to talk privately." Ryan looked at him. "I tried that." Mom hissed. "Not here." There it was again. Not what did she do. Not is this true. Just not here. I could feel the room waiting for someone to decide what kind of scene this was going to become. For years, whenever something went wrong in my family, the person who reacted the loudest usually controlled the next 10 minutes. Brittany had always been excellent at that. Tears, outrage, accusations, retreat. Everyone else reorganized themselves around the explosion. At my wedding, with more than 100 people sitting 10 or 20 feet away, I made a different decision. I turned toward our wedding coordinator, Melissa, who was standing beside the cake table, looking like she wanted instructions and permission to disappear at the same time. "Melissa," I said, "can you come here?" Mom immediately said, "Aaron, don't make this worse." I ignored her and opened the wedding planning group chat on my phone. Daniel and I had used it for weeks with my parents and a few relatives to keep parking instructions, rehearsal timing, vendor arrivals, and family logistics in one place. I scrolled to the reception schedule and held it where Melissa could see. "Our cake cutting is scheduled for 8:10, I said. "That cake is not ours. Please take it out and ask the DJ to stay with the contracted timeline." Melissa glanced at Mom. Then she looked back at me. "Of course." Mom's voice sharpened. "Linda Wallace is listed as the family contact." "She is," I said. "For deliveries." Daniel and I signed the contract. Melissa gave a small nod that told me I did not need to explain further. She signaled to the server, and the second cake started moving backward toward the service doors. Brittany stared at it as if I had personally thrown her engagement ring into traffic. I didn't know until later how that cake had gotten there. Mom had paid for it herself and emailed Melissa describing it as a 5-minute family surprise before the scheduled cake cutting. Because I had listed Mom as a secondary contact so I wouldn't be dealing with flower deliveries and last-minute family questions while getting dressed, Melissa had assumed it was a harmless surprise we knew about. She had no reason to expect my parents were planning to insert my sister's engagement into my reception. The moment I said no, she followed my instruction. That mattered to me. Not because of the cake itself, but because for once I had said no and nobody could quietly translate it into yes. Dad was still trying to pull Ryan aside. Brittany was asking him, "What did she tell you?" Over and over, meaning me. Mom had stopped recording, finally, but she kept the phone clenched in one hand. Ryan looked at Brittany. "Aaron didn't tell me anything." "Then what is this?" "You know what it is." "No, I don't." He gave her a look I had never seen him give her before. Ryan had always seemed patient with Brittany, sometimes to a degree I found exhausting. He had listened when she interrupted. He had laughed when she told long stories where she somehow became the emotional center of someone else's problem. That night, he looked at her as if every familiar gesture had been rearranged into something he no longer recognized. Dad lowered his voice. "Ryan, I told you this isn't the time to make a permanent decision because you're angry." My attention snapped to him. "Dad," I said. "What permanent decision?" Nobody answered. Ryan did eventually. "I told him earlier I wasn't proposing." Brittany's face drained. I looked at Dad. "Before this?" He said nothing. Ryan opened the ring box just enough for me to see the stone, then closed it again. "Before this." For a moment, anger hit me so cleanly that everything else disappeared. My parents had not simply misread the room. Dad had known Ryan had withdrawn his proposal, and they had gone forward anyway. Mom had arranged the cake. Dad had physically put the ring into Ryan's hand in front of everyone, apparently believing the pressure of an audience would finish what Ryan had already said he would not do. Daniel squeezed my hand once. I turned to him. "We're cutting our cake." He studied my face. "You sure?" "Yes." That was the decision that saved the rest of my wedding for me. Not because the scandal vanished. It didn't. People whispered. Brittany disappeared toward the hallway with Mom close behind her. Dad stayed near the doors, looking torn between following them and trying to stop Ryan. But Daniel and I walked back to the cake table, and when the DJ hesitated, I gave him a nod. He announced us. People stood. The applause this time was awkward for the first few seconds and then became real. Daniel leaned toward me while we held the knife together. "This is a very aggressive cake cutting," he murmured. I laughed, an actual laugh. "Don't tempt me. That knife is mostly decorative." "Then you're safe." We cut the cake we had chosen. The one with the lemon layer Daniel liked, and the almond layer I had insisted on after 3 tastings. We fed each other normal-sized bites, because I had warned him weeks earlier that if he smeared frosting on my face, our marriage might set a speed record. We danced. We spoke to guests. I hugged my college roommate. Daniel danced with his mother. My uncle told the same terrible joke he had told at rehearsal dinner. The evening never returned to what it had been before that second cake entered the room, but it did return to being ours. About 40 minutes later, Ryan found Daniel and me near the corridor outside the ballroom. "Can I talk to you both?" he asked. Daniel looked at me. I nodded. Ryan looked relieved that I had put a limit on it. We stepped into a quieter section near the hotel conference rooms. Through the doors behind us, I could still hear the bass from the dance floor. Ryan rubbed one hand over the back of his neck. "I owe you an explanation." "You owe Brittany an explanation," I said. "You don't owe me one for not proposing. This is about you." That got my attention. He hesitated. "Earlier, Brittany asked me to grab her laptop from the bridal suite." She wanted a slideshow file she and your mom had been working on. I waited. The laptop was open. A message notification came up. From who? Allison. I knew the name. One of Brittany's closest friends. What did it say? Ryan looked uncomfortable repeating it. Which version did you send, Linda? I frowned. Version of what? That's what I asked. He said the notification preview had included my name and part of an image. He had not gone digging through Brittany's messages. He had carried the laptop back and asked her what Allison meant. At first, Brittany had laughed and told him it was an inside joke. When he kept asking, she said he didn't understand how our family communicated. Then she admitted she had cropped a few things I had written because Mom would focus on the wrong part if she saw entire conversations. I felt my stomach tighten. Cropped what things? She wouldn't give me a straight answer. Then she said you could be harsh and that she was only helping your mom understand what you actually meant. Daniel's voice was calm. That still doesn't explain why you called off a proposal. Ryan nodded. I told her to show me an example. And? She sent one to my phone. Not showed him on her screen. Sent it to him. That detail would become important later. Ryan took out his phone but stopped before opening anything. I didn't know what was real after that. She kept saying it wasn't lying because the meaning was still true. I asked her how many times she'd done it. She wouldn't answer me. I stared at him. What did the screenshot say? He opened the message Brittany had sent and turned the phone toward me. It showed a conversation with my name at the top. One of the messages, supposedly from me, referred to my mother in a way that was cold enough to make me uncomfortable. Not because I remembered writing it, because it sounded almost like something I might write. That was worse. I had never been the softest texter in my family. When I was busy, I was brief. When I had already answered a question 3 times, my 4th answer did not come decorated with hearts and apologies. Brittany used to joke that I texted like I was closing a business email. Daniel had once told me I kept old messages like corporate records because I almost never deleted anything unless I needed storage space. The screenshot on Ryan's phone used my rhythms, my punctuation, even a phrase I had probably used before, but there was something wrong with it. I couldn't identify it immediately, and I was not going to stand in a hotel corridor on my wedding night trying to reconstruct years of text messages from memory. Send that to me, I said. Ryan did. I looked at him. Did I ask you to break up with my sister? No. Did I ask you not to propose? No. Did I know you were planning to propose? No. Good. His eyebrows lifted slightly. If this becomes a story tomorrow about me sabotaging your relationship, I want you to remember those answers. I will. Daniel asked. When did you tell Michael the proposal was off? Before dinner. I asked him to give me the ring back. That surprised me. Why did Dad have it? The jeweler finished resizing it yesterday. Brittany and I were sharing the hotel room, and I didn't want her finding it in my bag. Your dad already knew about it because I'd asked for his blessing. I asked him to hold it until tomorrow morning. I wasn't going to propose tonight. I planned to do it on our trip in 2 weeks. And Dad refused to give it back? He said I was angry and shouldn't make a permanent decision in the middle of a wedding. I closed my eyes for 1 second. Of course he did, Ryan continued. Then the cake came out, and your dad put it back in my hand. There were about 12 things I wanted to say about that, most of which would have violated my own rule about not turning my wedding into a courtroom. So I said, "That's between you and my parents." Then I looked through the ballroom doors. Daniel and I still had guests inside, people who had flown in, people I actually wanted to see. I'm going back to my reception. Ryan nodded. I'm sorry. For what? For believing some things about you that I probably shouldn't have. That landed differently. What things? He looked toward the ballroom. I think that's a longer conversation. Then not tonight. For once, I was not going to let my sister determine the schedule of my life simply because she had created an emergency. Daniel and I went back inside. Mom tried to intercept me near the dance floor 10 minutes later. Ryan is refusing to talk to Brittany, she said. Can you please help calm this down? No. Her eyes widened as if I had slapped the table. Erin, your sister is devastated. I'm getting married. You're already married. I looked at her. She seemed to hear herself only after the words were out. I said, "Yes, and I'm still at my wedding." Dad joined us. "Nobody is asking you to fix everything. You're asking me to leave my reception to fix Brittany's relationship. We're asking you to help." "No." Mom lowered her voice. "You don't have to be so cold." "I'm not being cold, I'm being clear. Ryan and Brittany are adults. Whatever happened between them, they can deal with it. Daniel and I are going back to our guests." Dad started to say my name in that exhausted tone he had used for years whenever I was supposed to become the reasonable one. I stopped him. "Not tonight, Dad." Then I walked away. Daniel followed me, grinning faintly when we were out of earshot. "What?" "You just told your father not tonight in exactly the tone he uses on everyone else." I've had excellent training. The last hour of the reception was quieter. Brittany did not return to the dance floor. Mom spent most of it somewhere outside the ballroom. Dad came back eventually, but stayed near his table. I noticed relatives watching me for cues, and I refused to give them a performance. I danced with Daniel. I said goodbye to people. I thanked the venue staff. I took pictures with friends whose names would never appear anywhere in Brittany's version of my family. By the time we finally got upstairs, my feet hurt so badly that getting out of my shoes felt more urgent than solving any family conspiracy. Daniel loosened his tie and sat at the edge of the bed. "You don't have to look at that tonight." I was already holding my phone. "Yes, I do." He gave me a tired smile. "Corporate records?" "Shut up." I opened the screenshot Ryan had forwarded. The message supposedly from me said something about Mom always making everything harder and me being tired of explaining myself to her. The phrasing felt familiar. Not the sentence, the structure. I searched my messages for Mom's name and the date visible in Brittany's screenshot. There were years of threads, family arrangements, dinner plans, questions about appointments, pictures of things Mom wanted me to buy, arguments I barely remembered, apologies I remembered too well. I found the date. Then I found the conversation. I read it once, then again. Daniel saw my face change. "What?" I turned my phone so he could see. The beginning was the same. So was part of the sentence Brittany had shown Ryan. But her screenshot stopped, where mine continued, and one line in hers did not appear in my original at all. Daniel looked from my screen to the image Ryan had forwarded. "Aiden?" "I know." I scrolled upward to make sure there wasn't another message I had forgotten. Then downward. Nothing. For years, whenever Mom had said, "Brittany showed me what you wrote," I had assumed the argument was about interpretation, tone, context, hurt feelings. I had defended myself, sometimes badly, sometimes angrily, but I had never considered the possibility now sitting in my hand. I looked at Daniel and said, "I need to see the original versions of everything she showed them." Because the message on my phone was real. The screenshot Brittany had sent Ryan was not. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the second cake rolling through the ballroom, my mother lifting her phone before anyone had even explained what was happening, my father pressing that ring box into Ryan's hand after Ryan had already told him no. But those images kept getting replaced by the screenshot on my phone. Brittany's version looked convincing because most of it was mine. Same name at the top, same rhythm, same short sentences I used when I was tired or irritated. If someone had shown it to me without the original beside it, I might have believed I had written every word. Daniel was awake before me. I knew because when I opened my eyes, he was sitting against the headboard with a paper cup of hotel coffee in one hand and his phone in the other. His tie from the night before was still draped over the chair. My wedding dress hung inside its garment bag near the window, and for a few seconds the room looked exactly like the morning after a normal wedding. Then I saw my phone on the nightstand and remembered why it was there. "You slept about 3 hours," Daniel said. "You counted?" "You kicked me twice." "That sounds like marriage." "It has been less than 24 hours. I'm already concerned about the long-term trend." I smiled despite myself, then reached for my phone. Daniel sighed. "I knew that was coming. I'm not spending all morning on it." "You said that at 2:15? I was technically right. That was nighttime." He handed me coffee. "Aaron." I looked at him. You don't have to solve 4 years of family problems before checkout. I know. That was true. But it was not the same as being able to leave what I had found alone. I opened the original conversation again. The screenshot Brittany had sent Ryan showed me telling Mom that I was tired of explaining myself and that she made everything harder. My actual thread told a different story. Mom had asked me the same question 3 times about whether I could change a dinner reservation after I had already explained that the restaurant had no later tables. My first answer had been polite. My second had been shorter. By the third, I had written, I already explained why I can't change it. I can't keep having the same conversation today. Brittany's screenshot ended there. Mine continued. Mom had replied, I'm not trying to upset you. Brittany said she might be able to call them. I had written, that's fine. If she can change it, great. I'm not mad at you. I just have 3 client deadlines today, and I can't keep stopping to answer the same thing. Brittany's version had removed that entire continuation. Worse, the line Ryan had shown me about Mom making everything harder did not exist anywhere in the thread. Daniel read both versions again. She kept enough of the real conversation to make the rest look natural, he said. Exactly. You sound like yourself. I know. That's what bothers you. Yes. If Brittany had invented some dramatic message where I called Mom names or said I hated the family, I would have known immediately. Instead, she had built around things I had actually said. I was impatient sometimes. I could be blunt. I did not decorate every boundary, so nobody's feelings were bruised by the existence of it. Brittany knew that. She had apparently learned that a lie worked better when it wore my clothes. I took screenshots of my original thread and saved them in a separate folder. Not because I thought I was building a legal case, but because I suddenly did not trust myself to rely on memory. Too many family arguments over the years had ended with Mom saying, that isn't how Brittany remembers it, or Dad saying, I'm sure everyone heard things differently. I had always treated those fights as separate incidents. Maybe I had been wrong to do that. Ryan texted shortly after 9 asking if Daniel and I were still at the hotel. He said he wanted to explain the ring situation because he realized what had happened in the ballroom made my parents' role look confusing. I almost told him it could wait. Then I remembered Dad saying Ryan was making a permanent decision because he was angry. I asked Ryan to meet us in the lobby. He looked terrible when he arrived. Not theatrically devastated, just exhausted. His dress shirt from the night before had been replaced by a gray sweater, and there were shadows under his eyes I had never noticed before. He sat across from Daniel and me near the windows, stared at his coffee for a moment, then said, I should explain why your dad had the ring. You don't owe me details about your proposal, I said. I know. But what happened last night makes more sense if you know. I let him continue. The jeweler had finished resizing and engraving the ring Friday afternoon. Ryan and Brittany were staying together at the hotel for the wedding weekend. He had picked the ring up downtown on the way to rehearsal events, realized he had nowhere safe to hide it in a room they were sharing, and asked Dad to keep it until Sunday morning. Dad had already seen the ring weeks earlier because Ryan had asked for his blessing. I wasn't proposing at your wedding, Ryan said. I was taking Brittany away in 2 weeks. I had reservations, a whole plan. Daniel asked, Did Brittany know? No. I thought of her reaction when the second cake appeared. The gasp. The hands over her mouth. Maybe she had not known the exact ring was in the building. That did not mean she knew nothing. Ryan went on. After his confrontation with Brittany about the messages, he had found Dad before dinner. I told Michael I wasn't proposing anymore. I asked for the ring back, and he refused? I asked. He said I was angry and I should wait until morning. Did you tell him clearly that the proposal was off? Yes. Not that you wanted to postpone it? No. I said I wasn't proposing. I sat back. My father had always described himself as someone who hated drama. He would leave a room rather than raise his voice. He told us family disagreements were rarely worth making permanent. Yet the previous night, faced with a man who had explicitly withdrawn consent from a proposal, Dad had decided the solution was to put the ring into his hand in front of a ballroom full of people. Why didn't you just take it from him before the reception? I asked. I tried once. He told me we'd talk after dinner. Then I got pulled into another conversation with Brittany. By the time I realized what your parents were doing, the cake was already coming out. And after you closed the box? I kept it. Good, I said, because I don't want to hear that thing changed hands 4 more times. Ryan almost smiled. Then his expression changed. There's something else. I waited. I believed Brittany about you. I had known that from the night before, but hearing it plainly was different. What did she tell you? A lot of small things. That you were dismissive of your parents. That you treated her like she was a burden. That you thought being busy made you more important than everyone else. I felt irritation rise, but I kept my voice even. And you believed her. She showed me things. Screenshots. He nodded. Did you ever ask me? No. That answer annoyed me more than an excuse would have. Ryan looked directly at me. I should have. Probably. Daniel stayed quiet. Ryan said, I'm not asking you to make me feel better about it. Good. He took that without flinching. I asked him one more question. When Brittany showed you those things before yesterday, did she ever show full conversations? He thought about it. No. Not that I remember. That mattered. Not enough to prove anything by itself, but enough to make the pattern harder to ignore. When Daniel and I went back upstairs, I called Mom. She answered on the 4th ring. Aiden. Her tone was strained, like I was already exhausting her, and I had not said anything yet. Where are you? At home. Is Brittany there? There was a pause. Yes. Of course she was. I want to ask you something. Mom exhaled. Can this wait? Your sister barely slept. I barely slept too. That isn't what I meant. I know exactly what you meant. Daniel looked at me from across the room. Not warning me, just reminding me with his face that I had said I wanted facts, not another fight. I lowered my voice. Mom, what exactly has Brittany shown you about me over the years? Silence. Then, what is Ryan telling you? This isn't about Ryan telling me anything. I'm asking what Brittany showed you. Mom's voice became defensive. I'm not doing this today. Why? Because your sister just had her relationship blown apart at your wedding. Her relationship did not fall apart because of my wedding. Aiden, did she show you screenshots of messages I supposedly sent? From somewhere near Mom, I heard Brittany's voice. Oh my God, is she seriously interrogating you? I closed my eyes. Mom, can you go into another room? That's ridiculous. No, it isn't. I'm asking you about conversations involving me. I don't need Brittany answering for you. Brittany's voice came closer. Put me on speaker. I'm not talking to Brittany right now. Mom said, she has a right to defend herself. I haven't accused her of anything to you yet. That stopped Mom for half a second. Then Brittany said loudly, Ryan already poisoned her against me. I almost laughed at the inversion. Mom, I said, yesterday Ryan showed me a screenshot Brittany sent him. It contained words I never wrote. I have the original conversation. Brittany cut in. That is such bullshit. Then this should be easy to clear up. Mom snapped. Enough, both of you. I hated that phrase. Both of you. It took 2 unequal actions and flattened them into one shared problem. I said, I'm not yelling. I'm asking you to look at 2 versions of the same conversation. Brittany said something I could not make out. Mom replied to her, not me. I waited. Finally, I said, this is exactly the problem. What is? I'm trying to talk to you about something I supposedly said, and Brittany is standing beside you answering for me. I am not letting you attack your sister. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to look at the original message. Mom's voice dropped. Not today. I knew that tone. It meant the conversation was over because she had decided the timing was wrong, not because the question had been answered. So I changed my approach. Fine. Then here is what happens from now on. If you want to talk to me about something Brittany says I wrote, I want to see exactly what she showed you, and we compare it with the original. No summaries. Mom sounded offended. You're talking to me like I'm an employee. No, I'm talking to you like someone who has been told for years that her own words mean something different from what she remembers saying. Brittany said, she's building a case against me. I heard Mom murmur something soothing to her. That was enough. I'm going to hang up now. Aiden, we can talk when you and I are actually talking. I ended the call. My hands were shaking, which irritated me almost as much as the conversation had. Daniel handed me the coffee I had abandoned earlier. You did better than I would have. I wanted to throw the phone into the wall. That's why I said better. I sat down. The worst part was that none of what had just happened felt new. Brittany had always been present in conversations she somehow should not have been part of. If Mom and I disagreed, Brittany knew. If Dad was upset with me, Brittany called to explain what he really meant. If Brittany and I fought, Mom already had a version before I spoke to her. I had tried to stop it before. That was what made me angriest. Years earlier, I had told Mom directly, "If you want to know what I meant, ask me. Please stop asking Brittany to interpret me." Mom had agreed. 2 days later, she had called and opened with, "Brittany says you're upset about Sunday." I remembered staring at my kitchen wall and thinking, then why did I bother? But I had bothered. Over and over. The problem was that I had always assumed the worst thing happening was interpretation. By noon, Dad called me. "I talked to your mother." "That was quick. Don't start." "I haven't started anything." He sighed. "Everyone is upset. Then maybe everyone should stop talking about how upset they are and look at what actually happened." Brittany says Ryan misunderstood what he saw. Ryan says Brittany admitted she changed messages. People say things when they're scared. "Dad, do you remember your procedure 3 summers ago?" The question caught him off guard. "What does that have to do with anything? Just answer me." "Yes. You were supposed to go in early. I couldn't drive you there because I had a client meeting, but I told you I could pick you up afterward." He was silent. "Do you remember being angry with me?" "I remember you saying work was more important." "I never said that." "That was the impression." "From whom?" Another silence. I opened my messages and searched the date. I had done enough work with clients to be obsessive about calendars, so I found the appointment week quickly. There it was. I read the original aloud. "I can't do the morning appointment. I can pick Dad up after. I have a client meeting I can't move." Dad did not speak. I continued. "Do you remember what Brittany showed you?" "I don't remember the exact wording." "Threat." He took a breath. "I remember something like, 'I can't do it. I have work.'" I looked at Daniel. He had heard it too. "Dad, those words are in my message. But she cut out that I could pick you up after." He immediately reached for the softest explanation. Maybe she was summarizing. "With a screenshot?" "I don't know, Aaron. That is the point. You don't know. But you were angry at me for months like you did." He grew defensive. "I wasn't angry for months. You brought it up at Christmas. That doesn't mean—" "Dad." He stopped. I forced myself not to keep pressing just because I finally had him cornered. That had been one of my mistakes in arguments. Once I knew I was right, I sometimes pushed past the point where the other person could still hear me. So I asked one question. "Did I choose work over helping you that day?" He answered more quietly. "No, you picked me up. Thank you. I'm not saying Brittany deliberately. I didn't ask you to." He sighed again. Then he said, "Your mother may still have those screenshots." I straightened. "What screenshots?" "The things Brittany sent her. Your mother saves everything when she's upset. Pictures, messages, all of it. She showed me some of them more than once. That was the first useful thing either parent had told me." "Does she still have them?" "I think so." "Where?" "On her phone. Maybe in an album. I don't know." I thanked him and ended the call before we could slide back into another argument. Daniel looked at me. "You have a direction now. I have something better than a memory." But before I called Mom again, another memory came back to me. Thanksgiving, several years earlier, before the screenshots had become something I questioned. That Thanksgiving was one of the reasons my parents found Brittany's version of me believable. I had said something cruel. Not as cruel as what she later claimed, but real enough. Mom had changed our plans twice because Brittany was running late. Then once more because Brittany decided she wanted to stop by Ryan's family first. Dinner moved. A family photo moved. Dessert moved. By the time Brittany arrived, everyone had been waiting almost an hour, and Mom immediately started rearranging the rest of the evening around her. I had been irritated long before Brittany walked through the door. Eventually, Mom asked me if I could delay leaving, because Brittany wanted all of us to watch an old family video together. I snapped. Maybe for once this family doesn't have to organize itself around Brittany. The room went silent. Brittany's face changed. She said, "Wow." Mom said my name like a warning. I knew immediately I had said it badly. What I meant was that I was tired of plans changing around whichever person created the most disruption. What I said was that everything revolved around my sister. There was enough truth in it to hurt. I apologized later for saying it that way. Brittany told me she accepted the apology. But after that, whenever Mom told me Brittany had shown her something harsh I supposedly wrote, there was already a foundation under the accusation. Erin thinks Brittany gets special treatment. Erin resents the family. Erin believes she is too busy for us. One real angry sentence had made dozens of later distortions easier to believe. I had given Brittany the perfect reference point. That did not make the things she changed my fault, but it explained why my parents had not immediately rejected them. By late afternoon, I had 2 messages open side by side on my laptop. The one from Dad's procedure, the one Ryan had forwarded. Both used my real words. Both changed what those words meant. I was no longer asking whether Brittany had altered one screenshot. I was asking how many family memories had been built from them. And for the first time, I knew where some of the answers might still be sitting. On my mother's phone. By Sunday evening, I had stopped thinking of what Brittany had done as a collection of bad family memories and started treating it like a pattern. Not because I wanted to spend the first week of my marriage investigating my sister, and not because Daniel encouraged me to. He actually did the opposite. He watched me sit at our kitchen table with my laptop open, 3 different text threads on the screen, and finally said, "You know there are probably 4 years of messages in there. I know. You are not reading 4 years of messages. I know. You said that too fast." I closed the search bar and leaned back. He was right. If I started scrolling through every disagreement, every dinner plan, every birthday, every time Mom had used Brittany's name in a sentence, I could lose days and still prove nothing. So I stopped trying to find every lie. I chose 5 moments I already knew had changed something in my family. Thanksgiving, when I had snapped about everyone organizing themselves around Brittany. Dad's procedure, when they believed I had chosen work over him. Mom's 60th birthday, when she had barely spoken to me through dinner. Christmas, when Mom and I went nearly 6 weeks without talking. And the months leading up to my wedding. I made 4 columns on a page. What I actually said. What my parents remembered. What Brittany showed or told them. What happened afterward. Daniel looked over my shoulder. "That is the most Erin thing I have ever seen. I make operations problems smaller for a living. This is your family, which is why they desperately need operations." He laughed, but then his expression softened. "Just don't turn our first week married into a forensic audit." I won't. I meant it. I did not need to prove every unpleasant thing that had happened since Brittany and I were children. I needed to know whether the same mechanism had repeated often enough to explain why I kept walking into rooms where everyone seemed angry with me before I knew there was a problem. Once I looked at it that way, something obvious became impossible to ignore. Brittany had access I did not. I lived about 45 minutes from my parents. Not across the country. Not even in another state. I called Mom nearly every week. I went to dinners, birthdays, holidays, and family events. Before the wedding, I had talked to her constantly about flowers, guest lists, seating, and all the ordinary things mothers and daughters argue over when one of them has opinions about linen colors. I was not absent from my family. But Brittany lived less than 10 minutes from my parents. That difference mattered more than I had admitted. I could spend 20 minutes on the phone with Mom explaining why I could not come Saturday, but could come Sunday. Then I would go back to work, make dinner, answer clients, live the rest of my life. Brittany could show up at Mom's kitchen an hour later and sit there until 9. She did not have to say, "Erin hates you." Brittany was better than that. She could say, "I know Erin didn't technically say she was angry, but you could hear it." Or, "She's probably just stressed. You know how she gets when family stuff interrupts work?" Or, my personal favorite, "Don't take it personally. Nothing makes people take something personally faster than being told not to. The most effective thing about Brittany was that she usually sounded like she was defending me. Years earlier, Mom had called after one of those conversations and said, "Brittany says you're upset with me." I remembered standing in my kitchen, holding a grocery bag in one hand. "Then why are you asking Brittany?" Mom had gone quiet. "If you want to know whether I'm upset," I said, "ask me. Don't ask Brittany what I mean. Ask me what I mean. I wasn't asking her to interpret you. You just told me what she says I feel." Mom sighed. "Fine. Are you upset?" "No." "Okay. I thought we had solved something." 2 days later, she called and said, "Brittany thinks you're still bothered about Sunday." I actually laughed. "Mom, what?" "We just had this conversation. I'm only telling you what she said." That's the problem. At the time, I had seen it as an annoying family habit. Brittany liked knowing everything. Mom liked discussing everything. Dad liked not discussing anything, until it became unavoidable. I had not considered that being the person in the middle gave Brittany something valuable. She got to decide what crossed from one side to the other. The next day I asked Dad to meet me for coffee without Mom or Brittany. He tried to turn it into a phone conversation. "What are we doing that requires coffee? Looking at your phone and mine at the same time? That sounds ominous." "It's less ominous than another family call with Brittany in the background." He complained, but he came. Dad was already sitting near the window when I arrived, stirring coffee he took black and did not need to stir. That was how I knew he was nervous. I sat across from him and put my phone on the table. "Before you say anything," he said, "I'm not choosing sides. That sentence usually means you already did." "Iden." "Sorry, that was sharper than necessary." He looked mildly surprised. "I'm trying something new," I said. "Marriage? Not making every true thought my opening statement." That got half a smile. Then I opened the message from his procedure. "I want you to look at this again." He read it. I had already shown him over the phone, but this time I made him read the whole exchange himself. "I can't do the morning appointment. I can pick Dad up after. I have a client meeting, I can't move." Dad frowned. "You picked me up." "Yes. I remember." "Then why did you spend months believing I refused to help you?" "I didn't spend months." "Dad." He stopped. I slid the phone a little closer. "What did Brittany show you?" "I told you, I don't remember exactly." "Mom saved the screenshots. You told me that." "Yes. So, at some point you saw them." "I saw some. And what do you remember?" Dad rubbed his thumb along the paper sleeve on his coffee cup. "I remember thinking you were being cold." "Because?" "Because it looked like you said you couldn't do it because you had work." That sentence is in there. "I know." "So, if Brittany cut out the part where I said I could pick you up, is that a summary?" He looked away. Maybe she summarized badly. "There it is." "What?" "The most generous possible explanation for Brittany." He leaned back. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to stop changing the standard every time the evidence gets uncomfortable. That's not fair. It may be impolite. That doesn't make it unfair." His face tightened. I knew I was pushing. I also knew Dad's usual move. He would start talking about tone, then everyone's feelings, then how family was too important to destroy over a text message. By the end, the original question would be gone. So I asked it before he could move us anywhere else. "If I showed you a screenshot Brittany sent that removed half a message and changed what I meant, what would you call that?" "I'd call it incomplete." "Would you ask her why she did it?" "I'd ask both of you what happened." "Why both of us?" He frowned. "Because you're both involved." "No. If someone alters what I said, there is one person altering it." He stared at me. Then he said, "I don't want another war between you two." There it was. Not I don't believe you. Not I think Brittany is right. Just I don't want another war. I lowered my voice. "Dad, avoiding the fight doesn't make you neutral." He looked down at his coffee. I did not get an apology that morning. I did not get a revelation. What I got was something smaller and, at that point, more useful. Dad admitted he had seen enough over the years to know Brittany's versions were sometimes incomplete. He just had not wanted to call that what it was. I left the coffee shop thinking about Mom's 60th birthday. That dinner had bothered me for almost 2 years because I had never understood why she was angry. Mom had been recovering from a minor knee procedure that summer. Nothing catastrophic, but she tired easily and hated admitting it. Brittany wanted a large dinner with relatives, drinks afterward, and people coming back to the house. I thought that sounded miserable for Mom, so I called her. "What if we keep dinner smaller this year?" I asked. "Immediate family, Aunt Carol, if you want, then we can do something bigger when you're feeling better." There was a pause. "You don't want everyone there?" "I didn't say that. It sounds like you don't. I'm asking whether you want 30 people around you when you still complain after standing for 20 minutes. "I do not complain. You called me yesterday because the grocery store checkout line was too long. That was different." I laughed. "Mom, I'm not trying to cancel your birthday. I'm trying to make it enjoyable." She eventually agreed to a smaller dinner. Or I thought she did. The night of her birthday, I walked into the restaurant and knew immediately something was wrong. Mom hugged Brittany first and held on. When she hugged me, it was brief. She thanked Brittany for making sure the people who mattered were there. I looked around the table. Dad, Brittany, Ryan, Aunt Carol, Daniel, and me. I had no idea what that comment meant. Later, when dessert came, I tried to ask, "Are you upset with me?" Mom smiled without warmth. "Why would I be?" "That usually means yes." "Not everything has to become a confrontation, Erin." I asked one question. Brittany leaned across the table. "Tonight isn't about fighting." I looked at her. "I'm talking to Mom, and she clearly doesn't want to do this." Mom said nothing. That silence became Brittany's permission. She reached for Mom's hand and started asking about the cake. I remember sitting back in my chair and thinking I had somehow become the rude person at a birthday dinner without knowing what I had done. On the drive home, Daniel asked what had happened. "I have no idea." That was the truth. Now, almost 2 years later, I called Mom and asked her about it. She did not want to meet. I asked again. Finally, she agreed on one condition. No ambushing Brittany. I didn't invite Brittany. I mean, don't turn this into some attack on her. I'm asking to see things she sent you. That sounds like an attack. It sounds like reading. Mom came to my house the next afternoon. She arrived with the stiffness of someone who had already rehearsed being defensive. Daniel was working in the other room. I had intentionally not asked him to sit with us. I did not want Mom later saying she felt outnumbered. We sat at the kitchen table. Dad said you kept screenshots. Mom looked annoyed that he had told me. "I keep things." "I know. That doesn't mean Brittany did anything wrong. I haven't asked you to decide that." She unlocked her phone. For several minutes, she scrolled through old photos and messages. Mom saved everything that hurt her. Screenshots of arguments. Long texts. Photos of flowers people had sent after apologies. She had always called it having a good memory. Eventually, she found an album. There were more screenshots than I expected. Not hundreds, but enough. My name appeared again and again at the top of conversations I barely remembered. I felt something tighten in my chest. "Can I look?" Mom hesitated, then handed me the phone. I started with the birthday. There it was. A screenshot Brittany had sent Mom around the week we planned the dinner. According to the image, I had written, "I don't want the whole family there. This family is exhausting." I stared at it. Mom watched me. "You remember that?" she said. "I remember the conversation." "Then why are we doing this?" I pulled out my own phone. It took less than a minute to find the date. My original message said, "I don't think a huge dinner is a good idea while Mom's still recovering. This conversation is exhausting because I'm trying to plan something she can actually enjoy." I put the phones side by side. Mom leaned closer. Neither of us spoke. The screenshot Brittany had sent her had removed most of the sentence. But that was not the worst part. My original said, "This conversation is exhausting." Brittany's version said, "This family is exhausting." Mom's finger froze against the edge of the phone. "That's not the same," I said. She swallowed. "It's one word." "No, Mom." I pointed to the screens. "It's one changed word. That is not the same thing." She stared at both. For the first time since the wedding, she did not immediately tell me I was being too harsh. I took a photo of Brittany's screenshot with my own phone, then another of the full thread. I was careful not to alter anything. Dates visible, names visible, context visible. Mom looked uncomfortable. Maybe she remembered it wrong when she made the screenshot. Screenshots don't remember things. You know what I mean. I do. I'm just not going to help make it softer. Her face tightened again. I could feel the old argument waiting for us. Tone. Compassion. Brittany's feelings. So instead of chasing it, I kept scrolling. There were earlier screenshots where Brittany had simply cut off context. There were later ones that looked more aggressive. I did not try to solve all of them. Then I stopped. The timestamp on one image meant nothing for the first second. Then it hit me. I knew that date. I knew that night. Hospital waiting room. A relative had needed medical attention late in the evening, and Mom and I had driven over together. I had rushed out of my house so fast that I left my phone on the kitchen counter. I remembered because I had complained about it for hours. I had used Mom's phone to call Daniel. I had no laptop with me. No watch that could send messages. Nothing. I looked again at Brittany's screenshot. According to it, I had texted Brittany during the exact stretch of time I had been sitting beside Mom without a phone. The message itself was ugly, but suddenly the words were not what mattered. The time was. I looked up at my mother. She had been there. She knew I had not had my phone, and the expression on her face told me she recognized the date too. Mom's face changed before she said a word. Her eyes moved from the screenshot on her phone to mine, then back again. I watched the memory return to her in pieces. The hospital waiting room, the plastic chairs, the vending machine coffee she had complained about, the fact that I had used her phone to call Daniel because mine was sitting on my kitchen counter 45 minutes away. She knew exactly why the timestamp mattered. I could see it in the way her mouth tightened. "Mom," I said, "look at me." She did, reluctantly. "You remember that night?" "Yes." "You remember I didn't have my phone." "I remember you forgot it." "Did I have my laptop?" "No." "My watch?" "You weren't wearing one." "Anything I could have used to message Brittany?" She looked down at the screenshot again. "Not that I remember." "That isn't what I asked." Her shoulders stiffened. "Erin, I'm not going to sit here and be cross-examined." "I'm not cross-examining you. I'm trying to establish whether you already knew this screenshot couldn't be right." "I didn't know anything." "You knew I didn't have a phone. That doesn't mean I knew how the message got there." I stared at her. For a second, I almost let the sentence pull me into an argument about technology. Maybe Brittany had claimed some strange syncing problem. Maybe Mom had convinced herself I had written the message earlier and the screenshot showed it later. There were a dozen technical excuses she could reach for if the real question made her uncomfortable enough. So I stopped talking about the screenshot. "What did you do when you saw it?" Mom's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "You noticed something was wrong." "What did you do?" She did not answer immediately. That was when I knew the answer mattered. I remembered the hospital night clearly once I allowed myself to stay with it. A relative had needed to be checked out late in the evening. Nothing dramatic enough to become a family legend, but urgent enough that Mom had called and asked if I could go with her. I had been halfway through making dinner. I grabbed my coat, my wallet, and my keys, and left my phone beside the cutting board. I realized it in Mom's car. "You can survive 3 hours without it," she had told me. "That's easy for you to say. Yours is in your hand." At the hospital, I borrowed her phone to call Daniel and tell him where I was. I gave it back. For most of the evening, Mom and I sat side by side. We talked about Dad. We complained about the television in the corner. I bought her crackers from a vending machine because she refused to admit she was hungry. I could not have been texting Brittany during that time. Yet the screenshot on Mom's phone claimed I had done exactly that. "Did you ask Brittany about this?" I said. Mom looked toward the kitchen window. That tiny movement told me more than a denial would have. "You did." I asked her one question. "What question?" I asked why the time looked strange. "And what did she say?" Mom sighed. "That phones sync things differently sometimes." I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. "And you believed that?" I didn't say I believed it. That was worse. I kept my voice quiet. "Then what happened?" Mom rubbed her thumb over the edge of her phone. She got upset. "Of course she did. What did she say?" I don't remember every word. Then tell me what you remember. Mom hesitated long enough that I knew she remembered more than she wanted to admit. She asked why I was questioning her. That's all? No. I waited. She said she was tired of feeling like I always assumed you were right and she was wrong. I felt something cold settle under my ribs. Brittany had not needed to explain the impossible timestamp. She had changed the subject from evidence to loyalty. What did you say? I told her I wasn't accusing her. And then? She started crying. I looked at Mom. So you stopped asking. She was upset. You stopped asking. Mom's face hardened. What would you have had me do, Aaron? Call my daughter a liar because one timestamp looked strange? I would have had you look. At what? At the conversation. At my phone the next day. At hers. At anything. I was tired. We had just spent hours at a hospital. Brittany was crying. I did not want another fight. I leaned back in my chair. There it was. Not ignorance. A choice. Maybe a small one at the time. Maybe one Mom had barely registered. But a choice all the same. You could have asked me. I didn't want to drag you into it. You were already angry with me because of what you thought I wrote. I wasn't angry. Mom, you barely spoke to me for a week. That was about other things too. Like what? She opened her mouth, then closed it. I could feel how badly she wanted this conversation to become vague. Vague was where my family survived. Nobody lied. Things got misunderstood. Nobody favored anyone. Some people simply needed more help. Nobody ignored proof. They were protecting peace. I pointed at the screenshot between us. You saw something that didn't make sense. You asked Brittany about it. She cried. And instead of checking, you let it go. That does not mean I knew she was lying. I didn't say you knew. I said you knew something was wrong. Her eyes flashed. You have always been very good at making distinctions when they benefit you. That one landed. I sat still for a moment before answering because my first response would have been sharp enough to end the conversation. When I spoke, I kept my voice even. You're right about one thing. I care about distinctions. There is a difference between being fooled and deciding not to look. Mom pushed her chair back slightly. You are making this sound much simpler than it was. Then make it more complicated for me. I was trying to keep this family together. You were trying to stop Brittany from getting upset. That is unfair. Is it? Her phone buzzed against the table. We both looked at it. Brittany. Mom did not answer. The phone buzzed again, then a third time. I almost admired the timing. Mom picked it up and silenced it. 30 seconds later, another call came. Does she know you're here? I asked. Mom did not answer quickly enough. She does. I told her I was coming over. Why? Because she asked where I was going. I let out a slow breath. Mom, you're 62 years old. Don't talk to me like that. I'm not insulting you. I'm pointing out that you do not have to report your movements to Brittany. She worries. About what? That you might have a conversation with me without her? Mom started to respond, but the phone rang again. This time she answered. Brittany, I'm busy. I could hear my sister's voice through the speaker, even though Mom had not put it on speaker. Are you with Aaron? Mom closed her eyes. Yes. There was a pause. Then Brittany's voice rose enough that I could make out more. She's cornering you, isn't she? I actually laughed. Mom gave me a warning look. No one is cornering me, she said. Then why aren't you answering? She's doing this because Ryan left. She wants everyone against me. I leaned forward. Mom, please don't let her turn this conversation into that. Brittany heard me. Oh, of course she's there. Mom said. Brittany, stop. No, Mom. She has been building some case against me since the wedding. She wants to punish me because Ryan chose to believe her. I spoke clearly enough that she could hear. Ryan didn't choose me. He chose not to propose to you. Stay out of my relationship. You called into my conversation. Mom stood suddenly. Both of you stop. There it was again. Both of you. Brittany accused me of engineering the collapse of her relationship, and I corrected the fact. Mom flattened those two things into equal misconduct because equality was easier than deciding who had actually crossed a line. Brittany was crying now. Not loudly, just enough. Mom, I can't do this. I lost Ryan, And now Aaron is trying to make you think I'm some kind of monster. Mom's whole posture changed. Her shoulders softened. Her voice lowered. No one said that. I looked at the hospital screenshot still lying between us. The evidence had survived less than 2 minutes against Brittany's distress. I stood. Mom looked at me. Where are you going? Home. Aaron, don't do this. I'm not doing anything. I'm leaving because you and I are not having a conversation anymore. That's dramatic. No. This is practical. Brittany was still speaking through the phone. I picked up my bag. When you're ready to talk to me without Brittany participating, call me. Mom's expression shifted between anger and guilt. She is my daughter too. I know. She just lost someone she thought she was going to marry. I know. And you're pushing her right now. I am asking you why you ignored evidence that she may have changed something I supposedly wrote. That's exactly what I mean. You don't know when to stop. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said, I have stopped, Mom, several times. That is how we got here. I left before Brittany could use my exit as another piece of evidence that I was heartless. Daniel was working at the dining table when I got home. He took one look at my face and closed his laptop. Well? She knew something was wrong. His expression changed. She admitted that? Not in those words. I told him what had happened. The impossible timestamp. Mom asking Brittany about it. Brittany crying. Mom dropping the question. The phone calls while I was there. Daniel listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked, What answer are you looking for? I frowned. The truth. You already have part of it. I want Mom to admit Brittany lied. He leaned back. Do you need your mom to admit Brittany lied? Or do you need your mom to admit she chose not to look? I hated how quickly that clarified everything. Both. Okay. He waited. I stared at the floor. The second one is worse. Why? Because the first one makes Mom a victim, and the second makes her responsible. Daniel nodded once. He did not say anything about my mother being toxic. He did not tell me to cut my family off. He had never been interested in making my decisions for me. He only said, Evidence can tell you what Brittany did. It can't make your parents admit why they let it keep working. That stayed with me. I had spent years assuming the problem was information. If Mom could see the whole text, if Dad could hear the full conversation, if I could explain the timeline clearly enough, but what if they had sometimes seen enough? What if clarity was not the missing ingredient? That night, I went back to the 5 incidents on my list. I stopped at Christmas. That one had hurt more than I usually admitted. Christmas 2 years earlier had started with something stupid. Mom had made a comment about me not coming early enough to help. I had reminded her I was working until noon. She said Brittany had rearranged her schedule. I said I was not Brittany. Mom said I did not have to make everything a comparison. By the time dinner was over, we were barely speaking. The next morning, I regretted how the night had ended. I did something I had done dozens of times before. I texted Brittany, not because I wanted her to mediate, because she was with Mom. Tell Mom I can come Sunday. I don't want us ending the weekend like this. I remembered waiting for a response. Brittany eventually wrote, She's still upset. Give her some space. So I did. Sunday passed. Then Monday. I called Mom later that week. She was polite but distant. I assumed she did not want to talk. Mom assumed I had chosen not to come. We barely spoke for almost 6 weeks. At the time, I had thought both of us were stubborn. Now, I searched the old thread. The message was still there. Tell Mom I can come Sunday. I don't want us ending the weekend like this. Brittany's response was still there too. She's still upset. Give her some space. I called Mom. She did not answer. I waited. 10 minutes later, she called back. Is Brittany there? I asked. No. Good. Christmas, 2 years ago. After we argued. What did Brittany tell you? Mom went silent. I'm looking at my message, I said. I told her I could come Sunday. She told me you needed space. My hand tightened around the phone. Those exact words? She said you were still angry and you didn't want to come back over right away. I told her the opposite. Mom did not speak. I read my message aloud. Then I read Brittany's response. Mom whispered. She told me you wanted to be left alone. I stood and walked to the window because sitting suddenly felt impossible. For 6 weeks, I thought you didn't want me there. I thought you were punishing me. I tried to come back. I didn't know. You could have called. So could you. She was right. I closed my eyes. That's true. I had been hurt and proud. After the first cold call, I had stopped trying because I thought Mom had made her choice. That part belonged to me. But it did not erase what Brittany had done. Mom, why would she tell us opposite things? I don't know. I did. Or at least I was beginning to. If Mom and I spoke directly, Brittany was unnecessary. If Mom and I stayed hurt, Brittany became useful to both of us. She could tell Mom what I really meant. She could tell me how Mom really felt. She could comfort each of us about the damage she had helped maintain. The realization made the entire pattern feel different. This was not only about making me look selfish. It was about keeping the bridge broken and then standing in the gap. Mom, I said, how many times did I try to talk to you, and Brittany told you I didn't? I don't know. How many times did you try to talk to me and she told me something different? I don't know. That's the problem. I heard movement on her end. Then Dad's voice, farther away. What are you two talking about? Mom said something muffled. Dad came closer. Iden? I'm here. There was a pause. Then he said, quietly enough that I almost thought I had imagined it. There was at least one time I knew the screenshot left something out. I stopped breathing for a second. Dad, I said. What time? What time? I asked. Dad did not answer immediately. I could hear Mom moving around in the background. Then the scrape of a chair. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed. The defensiveness was still there, but underneath it was something else I had rarely heard from him when Brittany and I were involved in the same conflict. Embarrassment. It was last Thanksgiving, he said. Last Thanksgiving as in 2025? Yes. I pulled my laptop closer and opened the timeline I had been keeping. What happened? You already know what happened. I know what I remember. I want to know what you remember, he sighed. We were arguing about Thanksgiving plans. That narrowed it down to almost nothing. My family could turn Thanksgiving logistics into a congressional hearing. Which argument? The one about when everyone was coming over. I remembered it then. Mom had changed dinner from 4 to 5 because Brittany and Ryan were stopping somewhere else first. Then she changed it to 5:30. I had a client issue that week and had already arranged my workday around the original plan. I told Mom I could still come, but Daniel and I would leave when we had originally planned because we had another commitment the next morning. Mom had taken it personally. Brittany had apparently helped. Dad said, Your mother told me you said you were tired of rearranging your life around family. I said I was tired of rearranging the entire day every time the schedule changed. That's what I mean. No, Dad. Those are different sentences. He went quiet. I searched the date. My original message to Mom was still there. I can make 5:30 work, but I'm not rearranging the rest of my day again if the time moves one more time. Daniel and I will leave when we originally planned. Mom had replied, No one is asking you to rearrange your life. I had written, I didn't say my life, I said the rest of my day. I remembered exactly why that distinction mattered. Because by the time we arrived that Thanksgiving, Dad had already asked me why I was acting like seeing family was such a burden. I had been stunned. Now I asked, What did Brittany show you? Dad cleared his throat. She showed me a screenshot. Of what? A message that looked like you said you weren't rearranging your life around family. Did you ever see the full thread? Another pause. Yes. I stopped typing. When? You showed it to me. I remembered. It had been the next afternoon. Mom had called me ungrateful during cleanup. Brittany had tried to calm everyone down, which, at the time, I had found almost comical because I still did not understand she had helped start the fight. When I got home, I sent Dad screenshots of the entire exchange because I was tired of being accused of saying something I had not said. He had replied with one sentence. I remember it because it infuriated me enough that I had read it aloud to Daniel. Maybe Brittany took it the wrong way. Let's not turn one text into another family war. Dad, I said slowly, you saw the full conversation. Yes. You knew the version Mom had seen left something out. I knew there was more context. That is a very careful sentence. Aiden. No, I'm not attacking you. I'm trying to understand what you did with that information. I told everyone to move on. Everyone? Yes. Who had done what? He exhaled. This is exactly what I mean. You want to assign fault to every conversation. If Brittany showed Mom a screenshot that changed what I said, then yes, I want to know who did that. Maybe she misunderstood it. You keep saying maybe. Because I wasn't in her head. I'm not asking what was in her head, I'm asking what you saw. He was silent long enough that I knew he understood the difference. Mom said something in the background. Dad answered her quietly, then came back to me. I saw that the full message was different. Thank you. That doesn't mean I thought she forged anything. I didn't ask that. I thought she was upset. I thought you were upset. Your mother was upset. It was Thanksgiving, and your solution was that I should let it go. Yes. Why me? What? Why was I always the one who had to let it go? He gave me the answer so quickly I knew it was honest. Because I knew you could handle it. I stared at the screen. There are sentences that sound almost complimentary until you understand what they have cost you. What does that mean? You were always more reasonable. I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. So being reasonable became the reason I got less protection. That is not what I said. It's exactly what you said. No, I said I knew I could talk to you. And you couldn't talk to Brittany? I didn't say that. Then why didn't you? His irritation rose. Because every time you two get into something, she gets emotional and you get stubborn. I almost interrupted. Instead, I made myself listen. Dad continued. You'll argue, but eventually you can step back. With Brittany, once she gets upset, everything gets bigger. Your mother gets upset because Brittany is upset, and suddenly nobody is speaking. So you came to me because I was cheaper. What? Emotionally cheaper. That's ridiculous. Was it? I stood and started pacing. Phone pressed to my ear. If Brittany exploded, everyone paid for it. If I got angry, I eventually went home and went back to work. So every time you had to choose between confronting her and asking me to absorb one more thing, you picked me. You're making me sound like I calculated this. I don't think you calculated it. That stopped him. I meant it. Dad was not a mastermind. He had not spent years planning to make me the reasonable daughter and Brittany the protected one. That would have been easier to hate. I think it became a habit, I said. And because you called the habit keeping the peace, you never had to ask who was paying for it. He did not answer. I remembered that Thanksgiving conversation now, not just the text, but what I had said to him afterward. I had been furious. Dad had told me, fine, maybe Brittany took it wrong. Do we really need to blow up Thanksgiving over one text? I had snapped back. You call it keeping peace because admitting you're choosing the easier daughter would sound worse. At the time, Dad had hung up on me. I told him now. I said something ugly to you that day. You said I chose the easier daughter. I said it badly. You meant it. I did. And you still do. Yes. At least we were finally having an honest conversation. I added. But saying it harshly did not make the underlying thing untrue. Dad was quiet. Mom came onto the phone. Aaron, this is going too far. I'm talking to Dad. I'm sitting right here. That doesn't mean you have to referee. I'm not refereeing. I'm listening to you blame him for something Brittany did. No, I'm separating what Brittany did from what Dad did after he saw evidence. That distinction made Mom uncomfortable. I could hear it. Dad took the phone back. I'm not ready to agree with everything you're saying. I didn't ask you to. Then what do you want? I want you to stop calling yourself neutral when every neutral decision landed on the same person. He did not answer. I ended the call a few minutes later without forcing an apology out of him. I had started to understand that dragged-out apologies were not worth much. I wanted answers people arrived at when they could no longer hide from the question, not words they gave me because I had exhausted them. The next morning, Ryan called. He asked if I had 5 minutes. I almost said no, because every conversation involving Brittany had become 5 minutes that somehow swallowed 40. But Ryan had been careful about my time since the wedding, so I took the call while making coffee. I wanted you to hear this from me before someone turns it into something else, he said. That sentence has become threatening in my family. I broke up with Brittany. I stopped measuring coffee. Okay, not a break. Not space. I ended it. I leaned against the counter. I'm sorry you're dealing with that. I'm not calling for sympathy. Good. He let out a quiet breath that might have been a laugh. I also owe you an apology. You already apologized. Not specifically enough. I waited. He said, Last Thanksgiving, Brittany showed me something you supposedly said after you left. That caught my attention immediately. What? That you couldn't stand being around your family when everything revolved around her. I closed my eyes. That sounded like a mutated version of the real sentence from years earlier. The one I had actually said at Thanksgiving about the family organizing itself around Brittany. Did you see a screenshot? Yes. Did you ever see the original conversation? No. And you believed it? Yes. There was no defensiveness in the answer. That made it easier to hear. I thought you were difficult, he said. Not evil. Just harder than Brittany made herself sound. She made herself sound easy? That should have been my first clue. I smiled despite myself. Then he became serious again. I believed the person I loved. I understand that. I still should have asked myself why every story had the same villain. That was a better apology than telling me he was sorry for everything. I poured the coffee. What did Brittany say when you ended it? Ryan hesitated. I'm not going to give you details that are just between us. Fair. But something matters to what you're dealing with. What? She kept saying I didn't understand your family. She said I was treating editing a few messages like some huge betrayal. Editing. That was her word. I gripped the mug harder. What exactly did she say? Ryan thought for a moment. She said, I only changed things so Mom would understand what Aaron actually meant. I wrote the sentence down. Not because Ryan's memory alone could prove every altered screenshot. Because it told me something about Brittany's reasoning. She did not describe herself as inventing. She described herself as translating. That was how she had justified it to herself. Ryan added. The thing I couldn't get past was that she kept talking about your meaning like it belonged to her. I looked at the timeline on my laptop. That was exactly it. Ryan, did I ask you to leave her? No. Did I tell you anything about Brittany before you confronted her? No. Please remember that. I will. Because I have a feeling I'm going to need it. I was right sooner than I expected. By that afternoon, Aunt Carol texted. She did not accuse me of anything. That was one reason I liked her. She wrote, I'm hearing something strange and I'd rather ask you. Then, did you tell Ryan before the wedding that you would ruin his proposal if he did it at your reception? I stared at the screen. No. 3 dots appeared. Then she sent another message. Brittany says Ryan saw something you wrote. I typed, That is false. Ryan had canceled the proposal before I knew it existed. Aunt Carol replied, That's what I thought. Less than an hour later, another relative asked whether I had put Ryan against Brittany. By dinner, I understood what was happening. Brittany was rewriting the wedding. The second cake was no longer my parents forcing a proposal Ryan had already canceled. Now it was Brittany's planned engagement being destroyed, because I could not share attention. Ryan was no longer a man who had confronted her about altered messages. He was a confused boyfriend manipulated by an angry older sister. And the thing that almost impressed me was how fast the new story borrowed pieces of the old one. I was career-focused. I was cold. I resented Brittany being centered. I had said that one Thanksgiving that the family revolved around her. Those pieces were real enough to make the rest feel familiar. I did not start calling relatives. I did not post anything. I did not send screenshots to people who had not asked. When someone contacted me directly, I gave the same answer. Ryan canceled his proposal before the second cake came out. I did not know he was planning to propose. If Brittany says I wrote something, ask to see the original conversation. Daniel watched me send the third version of that response. You're very restrained. I'm furious. I know. Those are not opposites. He nodded. Also very Aaron. The next message came from my cousin Megan. It began differently. Aaron, before I answer Brittany, I want you to see what she sent me. There was an image attached. I opened it. For the first few seconds, all I saw was the sentence. If Ryan proposes at my wedding, I'll make sure he regrets it. My name appeared above it. The date was from several weeks before the wedding. The screenshot looked like a message inside a group conversation. There was a small reply preview above it, a familiar group icon in the corner. I felt my heartbeat slow, not speed up, slow, because I knew that screen. I had looked at it hundreds of times. Wedding planning, the family group chat. I zoomed in. Same group picture Mom had insisted we use. Same display format. Same date. Same little preview from the previous message about reception timing. Brittany had not simply fabricated a private text between the two of us. She had built this one from a conversation other people had been part of. Megan wrote, "She says you sent this and Ryan found out." I replied, "Do not delete what she sent you." Then I asked, "Did she send it directly to you?" "Yes." "When?" "This morning. Before I had warned anyone to check originals." That mattered. Brittany was not ignoring a new rule. She was doing what had worked for years. Send the screenshot. Let the image create the fact. Count on nobody going back far enough to see what had actually been written. I told Megan only, "Give me a little time. Don't forward it anywhere else." Daniel came home about 20 minutes later and found me at the dining table, with the screenshot enlarged on my laptop. He put down his keys. "That looks bad. It's fake. You checked?" "Not yet." He pulled out a chair. "Then check." I shook my head. "First, I'm sending something." I opened the family wedding planning group. For the first time, I stopped treating direct communication as a private request my parents could ignore. I wrote one message. "If anyone has a question about something I supposedly said or wrote, please ask me directly and include the original conversation. I'm not discussing summaries through a third person anymore." I read it twice. No accusation. No mention of Brittany. No screenshot dump. New argument? Then I sent it. Mom saw it almost immediately. Dad saw it. Aunt Carol reacted with a simple thumbs up. Megan read it. Then Brittany called. I let it ring twice before answering. "What?" "You know exactly what. I probably know several things. Pick one. You're telling the entire family I'm a liar. I did not use your name. Don't do that." "Do what?" "That technical crap where you pretend everyone doesn't know what you mean." The irony was so sharp I almost admired it. "I told people to ask me directly about things I supposedly said." "You're building a case against me." "I'm checking my own messages." "Because Ryan left me." "No. Because messages with my name on them do not match the messages on my phone." "You always do this." "Do what?" "You turn everything into evidence. Dates. Screenshots. Timelines. Like people are problems at your company." There it was. One of Brittany's oldest criticisms of me, now deployed exactly when facts had become dangerous to her. "I like dates because they don't cry when you ask them a question." That is exactly why Mom thinks you're cold. Mom is capable of telling me what Mom thinks. "You're enjoying this." "No. You got Ryan on your side." I almost laughed. There are no sides between Ryan and me. He chose you. "No, Brittany. He chose not to marry you." Silence. That landed. When she spoke again, her voice was lower. "You think you're better than me. I think I should be allowed to decide what comes out of my own mouth. You said those things." "Which things?" "You know." "No. That is what we are not doing anymore. If I said something, show me the original. You delete things." "I almost never delete anything." "That doesn't mean you couldn't." "Then show me something that exists somewhere besides a picture you control." She hung up. I sat there staring at the dead call. Daniel had heard only my half of the conversation. He said, "That went well. She accused me of turning everything into evidence." "You do. I know. You also appear to have picked an excellent week for it." Mom called 15 minutes later. I answered because I wanted to know which version Brittany had reached her with. "Aaron, your sister is very upset," I assumed. "She thinks you're trying to humiliate her." "I have posted nothing. You sent that message to the family." "I told people to ask me what I said." "You know what it implies?" "It implies I want people to verify things before believing them." Mom went quiet. A week earlier, she would have immediately defended Brittany. This time she said, "What did someone send you?" I noticed the difference. Not "what did you do?" What did someone send you? A screenshot. From Brittany? Megan says Brittany sent it directly. Mom Sahil. What does it say? That before the wedding I threatened to make Ryan regret proposing at my reception. That doesn't sound like you. I almost missed the importance of that sentence. Not because Mom had suddenly changed. Because for once she had paused before assuming the screenshot was true. I didn't write it. Can you prove that? I'm working on it. There was another pause. Then Mom said, Brittany says you've been trying to turn everyone against her since Ryan left. I'm not responsible for what Brittany says. I know. That was new too. Small, but new, Mom continued. She says Ryan only believes you because you make everything sound organized. I rubbed my forehead. Mom, please listen to how ridiculous that is. I'm just telling you what she said. No. She stopped. I told you I'm not doing this anymore. If Brittany has something to say about me, she can say it to me. I don't need you carrying it. I'm not carrying anything. You literally just carried 3 of her accusations into this call. Mom went silent. I softened my voice slightly. I'm not asking you to choose me. I'm asking you to stop being the delivery system. She did not agree, but she did not argue either. After the call, I returned to the screenshot Megan had sent. I ignored the sentence itself and looked around it. Group name, avatar, date, time, reply preview. There was something almost funny about Brittany choosing the wedding planning group. That chat had been noisy for months. Parking maps, rehearsal times, questions about flowers, Mom changing arrival times, Dad asking whether he needed to wear the same suit to rehearsal dinner, relatives confirming hotel rooms. I had opened it dozens of times a day before the wedding. I searched the date from Brittany's screenshot. Daniel set beside me. I scrolled, found the morning, found the reply preview, then found the message at the exact timestamp. I did not read it aloud at first. I simply turned the phone toward Daniel. The real message said, if Mom changes the reception schedule again, I'll have the coordinator send everything through me. Nothing about Ryan. Nothing about proposing. Nothing about making anyone regret anything. Same timestamp. Same group. Same reply preview. Different sentence. Daniel looked at the fake on the laptop, then the original on my phone. That's not a crop. No. That's not interpretation. No. He reached for his own phone. I'm in that group too. Wait. He looked at me. My first instinct was to send my original to Megan, Mom, Dad, Aunt Carol, anyone who had heard Brittany's version, to put the 2 images side by side and end the argument. Then I realized that would still leave Brittany one escape. She could say I had changed mine. She had already accused me of deleting things. One phone against one screenshot was still a family fight. But that group had not existed only on my phone. Daniel had it. Mo had it. Dad had it. Megan had used it. Other relatives had too. I closed my screenshot folder. Daniel frowned. What are you doing? Nothing yet. You found it. I found mine. He understood a second later. I pointed at his phone. Don't send anyone my screenshot. Why? Because I don't want them comparing Brittany's picture to something I provide. I opened the family group again and looked at the list of members. Tell them to open their own phones. Daniel opened the wedding planning group on his phone while I kept mine beside the fake Brittany had sent Megan. I did not touch his screen. I did not tell him where to scroll beyond the date. I wanted this clean enough that even my parents could not later say I had arranged the comparison. He searched the week before the wedding, found the reply preview visible in Brittany's screenshot, and stopped at the same timestamp I had found on mine. His message thread said exactly what mine did. If Mom changes the reception schedule again, I'll have the coordinator send everything through me. Same group name. Same little group photo Mom had chosen. Same message above it, about timing. Same timestamp. No Ryan. No proposal. No threat. Daniel looked at me. So now we have 2. We have 2 phones. That's usually what 2 means. You know what I mean. I was not trying to be difficult. I was trying to stop myself from treating confirmation as victory too early. If I sent Brittany's fake beside my phone and Daniel's, she could still say we had coordinated something. Ridiculous, maybe? But she had survived for years by making ridiculous explanations sound emotionally plausible. I had watched Mom accept sink issue rather than ask one more question. I was done underestimating how much distance people would travel to avoid admitting they had been fooled. I texted Megan first. Do you still have the wedding planning group? She replied almost immediately. Yes. I wrote, go to the date on the screenshot Brittany sent you. Don't use anything I send. Open your own thread and find that timestamp. There was a pause long enough that I pictured her scrolling. Then her call came through. Aiden, what does yours say? She read the sentence about the coordinator. I heard her exhale. That's not what she sent me. No. She sent this directly from her phone. You told me. I thought maybe you were both sending different versions of something private. It wasn't private. I can see that now. I asked her to do one thing for me. Keep the message Brittany had sent her and do not delete the group thread. I did not ask her to confront Brittany. I did not tell her to call relatives. I did not want a family mob. I wanted independent originals. Megan said, Do you want me to send this to Aunt Carol? No. Why not? Because if she wants to check, she can open her own phone. There was another pause. You've gotten very specific about this. I've spent several years being told I meant things I don't remember saying. That's fair. Before we hung up, Megan said something that stayed with me. I almost believed the screenshot because it sounded like something you might say if you were mad. I know. I'm sorry. You didn't invent it. No, but I didn't question it either. That was more self-awareness than I had heard from most of my immediate family all week. The next person I called was Aunt Carol. She had been in the group because Mom had recruited her for rehearsal dinner logistics and then somehow kept using the chat for everything from airport pickups to flower deliveries. Carol was not especially technical, so walking her back through months of messages took longer. What am I looking for? She asked. The message about the reception schedule. I have 17 messages about the reception schedule. Find the one where Mom changed something again. That is also not narrowing it down. Despite everything, I laughed. Eventually, she found it. She read the same sentence. Then she went quiet. Carol? I'm here. What do you see? The thing about the coordinator. And the message above it? She read the preview. It matched. Same time? Yes. I heard her shift the phone. Erin, what did Brittany send Megan? I told her. Carol used a word I will not repeat because she was still, technically, talking about my sister. Then she said, Do Linda and Michael know? Not yet. Are you going to tell them? I'm going to ask them to look. That distinction mattered. I did not need to tell my parents what the truth was anymore. I needed them to open their own devices and decide whether they were willing to see it. I called Dad first, because I knew Mom would be with Brittany emotionally, even if Brittany was not physically in the room. Dad answered from home. What happened now? That opening almost made me hang up. Instead, I said, Do you still have the wedding planning group? Yes. I need you to open it. He sighed. Erin, Dad, I am not asking you to believe me. I am asking you to look at your own phone. That got him. Fine. I heard tapping. Go to the date I'm texting you now. I sent only the date and timestamp. Not my screenshot, not Megan's, nothing else. What am I looking for? Read the message from me at that time. He found it after a minute. If Mom changes the reception schedule again, I'll have the coordinator send everything through me. Good. Is there a reply preview above it? Yes. Does it match the one I just described? Yes. Don't close the thread. What is this about? Is Mom there? In the kitchen. Put me on speaker and ask her to open the same group on her phone. He hesitated. I said, please. I heard him call her. Mom came closer. What's going on? I repeated the instructions. She immediately became suspicious. Why are we doing this? Because I want you to see something on your own phone. Erin, if this is about Brittany, it is about a message with my name on it. That was all I gave her. I heard more tapping. Mom said, I have it. Read what I wrote. She read the same line. I had now heard my original sentence in my own voice. Daniel's, Megan's, Carol's, Dad's, and Mom's. 6 devices. 6 identical originals. Okay, Mom said carefully. What am I supposed to be seeing? I sent the fake to both of them. There was a long silence. Dad spoke first. Where did you get this? Megan. Who sent it to her? Brittany. Mom said, maybe that's from a different conversation. No, look at the group name. Silence. Look at the picture. More silence. The reply preview above my message is the same. The timestamp is the same. The date is the same. Dad said nothing. Mom said, could someone have edited this after? I closed my eyes. Which one? What? Which version do you think was edited? Mine, Daniel's, Megan's, Carol's, Dad's, yours? She stopped. I continued. You are looking at the original thread on your own phone. Dad is looking at the same original. Daniel has the same thing. Megan has the same thing. Carol has the same thing. Dad finally said, that screenshot is different. Yes. Mom's voice was thin. I can see that. For the first time, I felt no urge to fill the silence for them. I let it sit. Dad asked, has Brittany seen this? She created the version Megan has. You don't know that she created it. I know she sent it. Maybe someone sent it to her. That was Dad's reflex again. Find the softest explanation available and live inside it until someone physically removed the walls. I kept my voice calm. Then she can tell us who. Mom said, we need to talk to her. I agree. That surprised her. You do? Yes, but not one at a time. Dad immediately resisted. I don't want this turning into some kind of tribunal. Neither do I. It sounds like one. I want one conversation where everybody is looking at the same original at the same time. Mom said, Brittany is already devastated. I almost snapped. Instead, I counted to 3. This is not about whether Brittany is devastated. This is about whether she sent relatives a fabricated message with my name on it. Mom did not respond. I asked, is she coming over today? Pause. Yes, of course she was. Then call me when she gets there. Dad said, Aaron, maybe you should come here. No. Why not? Because if I come there, it becomes me arriving to confront Brittany. I'll stay on video. You all keep your own phones in your own hands. Daniel, standing near the counter, gave me an approving look. I ignored him. About an hour later, Dad called. Brittany was there. Mom sat beside him at the kitchen table. Brittany was across from them. I could see only part of her at first because Dad had propped the phone badly against a fruit bowl. This is ridiculous, Brittany said before anyone had even finished saying hello. I looked at my screen. Hi to you two. Mom said you've dragged half the family into this. I asked people to open a group chat. Because you're obsessed. Maybe. That caught her off guard. I was tired of defending my personality every time she needed to move the conversation away from facts. Do you still have the wedding planning group on your phone? I asked. She laughed. I knew this was going to be some courtroom thing. Open it. No, Mom said. Brittany, what? Why am I the one on trial? Dad pushed his phone closer to her. You sent Megan a screenshot. So? Where did it come from? Iden. I had been waiting for that. Which conversation? You know which one. No, I don't. That is why I'm asking. Brittany's eyes narrowed at the screen. The wedding group. Good. Mom looked at her. Something about Brittany admitting the source mattered more than anything I could have said. Dad opened his thread again. Mom haters open. I did too. Go to the timestamp, I said. Brittany crossed her arms. I don't need to. Dad spoke more firmly than I expected. Do it. She stared at him. That small moment affected me more than I wanted it to. For years, Dad's first instinct had been to ask me to make things easier. Now, for once, he was asking Brittany to answer the question in front of her. She picked up her phone. Her expression changed as she scrolled. Not dramatically. Brittany was too controlled for that when she knew people were watching, but I saw it. She knew. Mom asked, what does yours say? Brittany did not answer. Read it, Dad said. She set the phone down. I don't know why mine looks different. My pulse stayed steady. Does it? I asked. She looked at me through the screen. You could have changed your thread. Daniel, who had stayed out of view, muttered something under his breath. I ignored him. Dad? He held up his phone. My thread says the coordinator message. Mom? Mine too. Megan's? Mom looked at me. She checked hers? Yes. Carol? Yes. Brittany said, so you called everyone before talking to me? No. I asked them to look at their own phones before I spoke to you. That's worse. Why? Because you wanted everyone lined up against me. No. I wanted sources you couldn't say I edited. Her face flushed. Mom said, Brittany, where did the screenshot come from? I told you. No. You said it came from the wedding group. It doesn't match the wedding group. It matched what Aaron said. That was the first crack. Not an admission, but close. I sat very still. What does that mean? I asked. Brittany turned toward Mom rather than me. You know how she talks. She gets furious when things don't go her way. She was angry about the wedding schedule. She was angry about me. She didn't want anything taking attention away from her. It was my wedding, I said. That doesn't mean nobody else was allowed to exist. Mom cut in. That isn't the question. Brittany looked at her. I saw real surprise. Mom repeated. Where did the sentence about Ryan come from? Brittany's voice rose. Why are you acting like this? Because I'm asking you a question. You always do this when Aaron gets upset. Suddenly, everything I say is suspicious. I almost admired how precisely she returned to the old strategy. Evidence became loyalty. Questions became betrayal. And if Mom comforted her now, the conversation would disappear exactly the way it had after the hospital screenshot. Mom's face softened for half a second. Then Dad said, just answer. Brittany turned on him. You're taking her side too? No. Yes, you are. Dad rubbed his forehead. Brittany, 5 other phones have the same message. Then maybe mine got messed up. That isn't how that works, I said. She snapped toward the screen. You're not a software engineer. No. But I know a group chat does not rewrite one sentence on your phone into a thread about your boyfriend while leaving the same timestamp, group photo, and reply preview. You don't know everything. Then explain it. She looked at Mom. Mom looked away. I watched Brittany realize the usual exits were closing. So she changed strategies. Fine, maybe I changed the wording. Nobody spoke. I felt Daniel move behind me. Dad leaned toward the phone. What did you say? Brittany exhaled hard. I said maybe I changed the wording. Mom stared at her. Why? Because that's what she meant. The room went completely still. It was strange how small the sentence sounded after years of damage. That's what she meant. I had heard versions of it my entire adult life. Brittany says you sounded angry. Brittany thinks you didn't want to come. Brittany says what you really meant was... Now, she had finally said the quiet part out loud. I asked, did I write that sentence about Ryan? You didn't have to. I'm asking yes or no. Oh my God. Aaron. Did I write it? No. Mom made a sound like she had been hit in the chest. Brittany immediately turned toward her. But Mom, you know what she's like. She says things in these careful little ways so she can deny them later. I could feel anger climbing into my throat. I forced it back down. Then why use a screenshot? Brittany stopped. If everyone knew what I meant, I continued, why did you need to make it look like I wrote something I didn't? You twist everything. I am asking one question. You were furious at the wedding schedule. Yes. You hated the idea of anyone making the day about me. I hated the idea of you getting engaged during my wedding without asking me. Say? No. That is not proof I threatened Ryan weeks before I even knew he was planning to propose. She rolled her eyes. You knew something was coming. I did not. Mom knew. I looked at Mom. That was the first time Brittany had dragged the engagement setup itself into the conversation. Mom's face went tight. Dad said, that has nothing to do with the screenshot. Brittany kept going. Mom knew Ryan had talked to Dad. Everyone knew something was going to happen. No, I said. You knew. Mom knew. Brittany's eyes flicked toward me. There it was. I did not need to chase it yet. The screenshot mattered more. Mom spoke quietly. How many times have you done this? Brittany laughed in disbelief. Done what? Changed something Aaron wrote. I didn't change things the way she's making it sound. Dad said, you just admitted you changed this. One sentence. I thought of Dad's procedure. Mom's birthday. Christmas. The hospital night. One sentence today, I said. She glared at me. I pulled up the birthday screenshot Mom had shown me. Original. This conversation is exhausting. Your version. This family is exhausting. Brittany's face hardened. You remember how you felt that day? That is not an answer. You were complaining about Mom. I was complaining about repeating the same planning conversation. You always have some technical explanation. Mom said, Brittany. My sister turned. Mom's eyes were wet now. Did you change that one too? I shortened it. You replaced conversation with family? Because that was what she was saying. No, I said. That was what you wanted Mom to hear. Brittany stood so quickly the chair scraped across the floor. This is insane. You have been waiting for this. You've always hated that Mom and Dad are closer to me, I almost answered. Then I realized something. She wanted me angry. She needed me to say something vicious enough to restore the old balance. Aaron is cruel. Brittany is emotional because Aaron is cruel. Then everything could become familiar again. So I stayed seated. I'm not discussing who Mom loves more. You brought everyone into this. You sent the fake to Megan because she asked what happened, and you answered by putting words in my mouth. You're acting like you never say anything awful. I have. That stopped her. I continued. I said at Thanksgiving that this family didn't have to organize itself around you. I said it badly. I apologized. I've been impatient. I've been blunt. I have said things I regret. Brittany stared at me. But those mistakes belong to me, I said. You don't get to manufacture new ones because the real ones aren't useful enough. Mom covered her mouth. Dad looked down. Brittany shook her head. You think admitting one mistake makes you noble? No, I think it makes the difference between remembering something and rewriting it. She grabbed her purse. Dad said, Sit down. I'm not staying here while you all gang up on me. Mom stood too. Brittany, please. And there it was again. Mom moving toward her. The old reflex. But something had changed. This time, Mom did not say, Aaron, enough. She said, I need you to answer me. Brittany froze. How many? Mom's voice shook. How many times did you change what your sister said? Brittany's eyes filled. I was trying to keep this family from falling apart. I felt something almost like disbelief. You kept us from talking to each other. I kept Mom from getting hurt. You made sure she was hurt by me. That's not true. Christmas. She looked confused. 2 years ago. I told you to tell Mom I could come Sunday. You told me Mom needed space. You told Mom I needed space. That was different. How? Because both of you were angry. So you decided neither of us should know the other wanted to talk. I was trying to help. That was Brittany's tragedy, if I was being generous. Somewhere along the way, she had stopped seeing a difference between helping and controlling. Dad said, Ryan was right. Brittany's face broke. Don't. I'm not talking about the breakup. Then don't say his name. I'm saying this is why he stopped trusting you. She looked at Dad as if he had betrayed her more deeply than anyone else in the room. Then she walked out. Mom started after her. Dad caught her arm gently. Linda, she shouldn't drive like this. She's 31. Mom looked at him. He let go of her arm. For once, nobody immediately followed Brittany. The front door slammed. Silence filled the kitchen on my phone screen. Mom sat back down. Dad stayed standing. I realized my hands were trembling. Not because I had won anything, because hearing Brittany admit even part of it had not made the last 4 years disappear. It had only changed the category of what had happened. Mom wiped at her face. She lied to us. I looked at her. That sentence would have been enough for me a week earlier. It was no longer enough now. At first, I said. Mom frowned. What? At first, she lied to you. I reached for the folder on my laptop, where I had saved the screenshot from the hospital night. Then I sent it to both of my parents. Mom's phone buzzed on the kitchen table. Dad looked down at his. I waited until the image was open on both screens. The night this supposedly came from, I said, Where was my phone? Mom did not answer. Dad looked at her. I continued. You were there, Mom. You knew I didn't have it. You asked Brittany why the timestamp didn't make sense. Mom's face went pale. Dad turned toward her. You asked her about this? Mom stared at the screenshot. I leaned closer to my camera. Brittany lied to you at first, I said. I need to know when you first realized something was wrong and decided not to look any further. Mom did not answer me. For several seconds, the only movement on the screen was Dad turning his head toward her, waiting for the same thing I was. Mom kept staring at the hospital screenshot, as if the image might become less damaging if she looked at it long enough. I had spent years watching my family move away from uncomfortable questions by changing the subject, softening the language, or finding somebody whose feelings needed immediate attention. This time, I did not help them. Mom, I said, when did you first realize something was wrong? I told you already. I didn't know she was lying. That isn't what I asked. Dad glanced at her. Linda? She looked at him sharply. Don't. Don't what? Stand there like you didn't know anything either. I'm not. You are. I almost interrupted, then stopped myself. For once, their discomfort did not need me to manage it. If they wanted to argue over which one had failed me more gracefully, they could do it without turning me into the referee. Mom picked up her phone and zoomed in on the screenshot. That night, she said finally. The hospital. I waited. I remember asking Brittany about the time. I know. She told me there was some kind of syncing issue, that maybe the message had been sent earlier and displayed later. Did that explanation make sense to you? Mom pressed her lips together. No. The word was so quiet I almost missed it. Dad looked at her. You never told me that. I didn't know anything for sure. That is not the same as thinking it made sense. Mom's irritation flared. Michael, please. I kept my eyes on her. What did you think? She pushed her chair back and folded her arms. I thought something didn't add up. There it was. Not enough yet, but finally honest. And then Brittany cried. Mom looked away. Yes. And you stopped asking. I told you that. Why? Because I didn't want another fight. That explains what you did. It doesn't explain why. Her face tightened. I had learned something over the previous week. If I asked Mom why she had believed Brittany, she could give me 100 answers. Brittany lived close. Brittany showed her pictures. Brittany sounded hurt. I was blunt. I worked too much. I had said cruel things before. Every answer would contain some truth. The harder question was why Mom had stopped checking after she suspected the evidence itself might be false. I don't know what you want me to say, she said. The truth. You always say that like the truth is one sentence. It doesn't have to be. Then stop trying to force me into one. I leaned back. Okay, take as many as you need. Dad lowered his eyes. Mom stared at me through the screen. I could see anger in her face. But I could also see something that had not been there before Brittany admitted changing the final screenshot. Fear? Not fear of me. Fear of what agreeing with me would require her to revisit. I thought, Mom began, then stopped. I waited. She tried again. I thought if Brittany was lying about that one, then I would have to go back through everything. My throat tightened. Everything what? All those fights. All those times she showed me things. All those times I thought you were being... She stopped. Being what? Cold. I nodded. Selfish sometimes. I nodded again. Like your work mattered more than us. I kept listening. Mom's eyes filled. And if she had changed that screenshot, then maybe I had been wrong about some of the others. Some. She closed her eyes. Maybe more than some. Dad sat down beside her. Mom continued without looking at either of us. And I didn't want to believe that. Why? Her voice broke slightly. Because then I would have to believe I had been treating you badly for things you didn't do. The sentence hurt more than I expected. Not because it surprised me. By then I already knew. But there was something different about hearing my mother say it herself. I swallowed. So you chose not to check. I was scared. That doesn't change the choice. I know. It was the first time she said it, without immediately adding something about Brittany. I let the silence sit. Mom wiped under one eye with her thumb. I am not saying I knew she was fabricating messages for years. I know. I didn't. I believe you. She looked almost relieved. Then I added, but after that hospital night, you knew there was enough reason to ask me. The relief disappeared. Yes. And you didn't. No. Because if I was telling the truth, you had already hurt me. She looked down. Yes, that was the first part of accountability I had been waiting for. Not an apology yet. Not forgiveness. Just the removal of the shield that had protected Mom from her own choices. Dad shifted beside her. I turned to him. And you? He frowned. We already talked about Thanksgiving. I know. I'm asking you the same question. What question? When did you first realize Brittany's version of me might not be reliable? He rubbed both hands over his face. I don't know. Dad, I'm serious. There wasn't one moment. That makes it worse, not better. He looked at me. I did not mean the sentence cruelly, but I was not going to soften it after it landed. Dad leaned back in his chair. There were little things. Like? The procedure. You believed her then. Yes. Thanksgiving last year. He nodded. Anything before that? He thought. There were times your mother would tell me something Brittany said you had written, and then when I spoke to you, it sounded different. What did you do? Usually nothing. Why? He gave a humorless laugh. You already know. I want to hear you say it. He looked irritated. Because I hate family fights. No, that is the slogan. What did you actually do? His jaw tightened. I knew I was pushing him, but this time the pressure was not about proving I was right. It was about refusing to let him hide behind a phrase he had used for decades. Dad finally said, I went to whoever I thought would calm down first. Me? Usually. Why? Because you would. Mom looked at him. Dad continued. You might get angry, you might leave, you might not answer for a day or two, but eventually you would talk. And Brittany? He exhaled. If Brittany got upset, your mother got upset. Brittany would stop speaking to everyone. Sometimes she'd show up crying. Sometimes she'd leave. Then Linda would worry. Everything got bigger, so you avoided confronting her. Yes, and asked me to absorb it. He hated the phrasing. I could see that, but he nodded. Yes. I rested my hand on the table. For years, I had heard variations of the same sentence from him. You're older. You know how she is. Don't make this bigger. Just let it go. Be the bigger person. I had always heard them as individual requests. Now I understood they had formed a system. Do you realize what you taught her? I asked. Dad frowned. What? That the bigger her reaction was, the less accountable she had to be. Mom looked uncomfortable. I continued. And you taught me that the better I handled something, the more of it you would give me. That wasn't intentional, Dad said. I know. The words surprised him. I don't think you sat down one day and decided to favor Brittany. I think you did what was easiest in the moment over and over, until easiest became normal. Dad looked at his hands. Mom said, we did not love her more. I didn't say you did. You keep using the word favoritism. I haven't yet. She stopped. I had been waiting for one of them to say it first. I asked Mom, when Brittany needed you, how did that make you feel? What kind of question is that? A simple one. She was my daughter. So was I. I know, but she called you more. Asked your advice more. Came by more. Yes. And I didn't need as much from you. Mom's expression shifted. I could see where the question was going before she wanted to. You always had your life together, she said. Mostly. You moved forward faster. Than Brittany? Yes. And you liked that she needed you. That is not a crime. I didn't say it was. Mom's voice sharpened. You're making it sound like I wanted her dependent. No. I think you mistook dependence for closeness. She went still. Dad looked at her. I continued because I knew if I stopped, she would retreat into anger. When Brittany called you 3 times a day, you saw that as loving the family. When I called once a week but handled my own life, you saw distance. When she rearranged her schedule for you, it counted as devotion. When I said I couldn't rearrange mine, it counted as rejection. Mom's eyes filled again. That is not completely fair. Probably not. She looked surprised. I'm sure there were times I could have come more. I'm sure there were times I chose work because work mattered to me. I'm sure I sounded impatient. But none of that explains why a screenshot from Brittany carried more weight than my original conversation. Mom had no answer. Dad spoke quietly. We trusted her more in those situations. The admission came so plainly that Mom turned toward him. Dad met my eyes through the screen. We did. Mom shook her head. Michael. No, Linda. He sounded tired. We did. Mom stared at him. He continued. Not about everything, but when it came to those fights, if Brittany said Aaron had said something, we usually started from believing Brittany. I felt a strange pressure behind my eyes. Not relief, exactly. Maybe the release of not having to prove one particular thing anymore. Mom looked wounded. I never thought of it that way. Dad said, neither did I. That doesn't mean we favored her. Dad gave her a long look. Then he said something I never expected to hear from him. We expected more from Aaron because Brittany made it harder not to. Mom's face changed. He kept going. We told ourselves Aaron was stronger, more independent, easier to reason with. So when there was a choice between asking Brittany to back down and asking Aaron to let something go, we usually went to Aaron. He looked at me. That wasn't fair. I did not speak. Dad's voice became rougher. And after enough years of doing that, I don't know what else to call it. Mom whispered, Michael. He looked at her. Favoritism. There it was. No dramatic music. No family courtroom. Just my father sitting at his kitchen table saying a word my parents had spent years avoiding. Mom covered her mouth. I had expected hearing it to make me feel vindicated. Instead, I felt tired. So yes, Dad said. We favored Brittany in ways we pretended were just about keeping the peace. Mom wiped her face. I hate that. So do I. That isn't what I meant. I know. She looked at me. I don't know what you expect me to do with this. Nothing tonight. Her eyebrows pulled together. I thought you wanted us to admit it. I wanted you to stop denying it. That isn't the same thing? No. I had learned that week that admission was not repair. It was only the place where repair could begin. Dad asked, what about Ryan? The question reminded me there was still one loose piece that mattered. Brittany had been telling relatives I had manipulated him, and my parents had not heard directly from him since the wedding. As if summoned by the subject, my phone buzzed on the table. Ryan. It was a message, not a call. I read it. Then I read it again. Daniel, who had been in the living room giving me privacy, looked over but did not come closer. Mom asked, what is it, Ryan? Her posture changed instantly. What does he say? I hesitated, then realized there was nothing private in the part relevant to me. He says he heard Brittany is telling people I convinced him to cancel the proposal. Dad closed his eyes. I continued reading. He says he wants to make one thing clear. He canceled the proposal before the second cake appeared. Before I knew there was going to be a proposal. And because of what Brittany admitted to him about changing messages, he says I never asked him to leave her. Mom looked down. Dad said, can you send that to us? I did. Not to the family. Just them. I did not need Ryan to become another weapon. His message only closed a door Brittany had been trying to keep open. Mom read it silently. Then she said, she really lost him because of this. I caught the shift immediately. Not because of Aaron. Because of this. It was progress. Small enough that I almost hated noticing it. Dad said, it sounds like it. Mom stared at the message. Then she began crying. Not loudly. I watched her try to pull herself together. I keep thinking about all those years. I did not rescue her from the thought. There were times you tried to tell me. Yes. And I told you that you were making things worse. Yes. I told you Brittany was just more sensitive. Yes. I told you to stop being jealous of how close we were. That one hurt. Yes. Mom closed her eyes. I'm sorry. I breathed in. There it was. The apology I had wanted for years. And it did not fix anything. I believe you're sorry. Her eyes opened. The expression on her face told me she had expected something warmer. I could not give it honestly. Dad said, Aaron, none of this means we didn't love you. I know. Then what does it mean? It means love wasn't enough to make you fair. Neither of them answered. I had no satisfaction in hurting them with that sentence. But it was true. Mom looked at Ryan's message again. Then the old reflex appeared so quickly I almost admired its strength. She inhaled. But Brittany just lost Ryan. I went still. Dad looked at her. Mom continued. What she did was wrong. I know that now. I know. But she is alone right now, and whatever else happened, she thought she was going to marry him. I stared at her. There were moments in a family when you could watch years of habit reassemble themselves in real time. Brittany had lied. Brittany had altered my words. Brittany had blocked reconciliation. Brittany had fabricated a threat about Ryan. Brittany had just admitted that she believed she had the right to change what I said because she knew what I meant. And Mom's nervous system still arrived at the same destination. Brittany is hurting. Everyone adjust. Dad said quietly. Linda. What? I'm not defending her. You are already moving toward her. She's our daughter. So am I said. Mom stopped. I did not raise my voice. That made the sentence heavier. I know you are. Do you? Her face crumpled. That is cruel. No. Cruel would be telling you that you have to choose. You're not? No. That surprised both of them. I sat back in my chair. I'm not going to compete with Brittany for my parents. Mom shook her head. This is not a competition. It has been treated like one for years. I'm done participating. Dad frowned. What does that mean? It means if Brittany needs you tonight, go be with her. Mom stared at me. You mean that? Yes. After everything we just said? Especially after everything you just said. She looked confused. I understood why. For my family, boundaries had always been interpreted as punishments. If I said no, I was angry. If I left, I was rejecting them. If I did not fix something, I was withholding love. I was finally learning not to accept that translation either. Brittany losing Ryan does not create an obligation for me, I said. You can support her. I am not asking you not to, Mom whispered. Then what are you asking? That my relationship with you stop depending on what Brittany needs. Dad leaned forward. Be specific. I appreciated that. Fine. If you want to know something about me, ask me. He nodded. If Brittany says I said something, you ask for the original before you call me angry. Mom looked down. No more messages through her. No more telling me what she thinks I mean. No more asking me to let something go because she will react worse. Dad nodded again. Mom asked, and if we make a mistake? You probably will. So what then? Then I decide what access you get to me based on what you do after. Her face tightened. Access. Yes. That sounds very clinical. Maybe. But vague boundaries have not gone especially well for us. Dad almost smiled, then wisely chose not to. Mom said, Are you cutting us off? No. Then what are you doing? I'm changing the relationship. She looked frightened. I understood that too. For years, my parents had assumed that whatever happened, I would remain available in roughly the same way. Maybe angry, maybe distant for a week, but eventually back in place. That assumption was ending. Dad asked, Can we fix this? Maybe. Mom flinched at the word. I continued before she could turn it into rejection. But not tonight. Not because you admitted you were wrong once. Not because you apologized. Trust is not a receipt you hand me and get the old relationship back. Mom cried harder. I wanted to comfort her. That was the difficult part. I still loved her. I did not want her suffering. But for the first time, I understood that easing her guilt immediately would only repeat the role I had played for years. So I let her feel it. Dad looked at me. What do you need from us right now? Nothing. That can't be true. It is. I thought for a moment. Actually, there is one thing. What? Do not call me tomorrow and tell me what Brittany said about this conversation. Dad closed his eyes. Mom almost laughed through her tears. Okay. I mean it. I know. And if she tells you I'm cruel for saying that? Dad answered before Mom could. We ask you. I looked at him. Good. The conversation ended about 10 minutes later. No hugs. No declarations that everything was going to change. Mom said she loved me. I told her I loved her too. Both statements were true. When the screen went dark, Daniel came into the kitchen carrying 2 glasses of water. How bad? I looked at the empty screen. They admitted it. Favoritism? Yes. He set a glass in front of me. How do you feel? Tired. That seems reasonable. Mom apologized. And? It mattered. But? I looked at him. But she still ended with Brittany needs us. Daniel nodded slowly. Of course she did. I almost smiled. I told her to go. To Brittany? Yes. His eyebrows lifted. You okay with that? I think so. I looked toward the dark window. For years, one of my deepest fears had been that if I stopped fighting for my place in that family, Brittany would get exactly what she wanted. Mom. Dad. The closeness. The role of the daughter they needed most. That night, something shifted. I realized Brittany could have it. Not because I did not love my parents. Because being loved should not require me to keep proving I deserve to be heard. Daniel squeezed my shoulder. My phone buzzed again. A message from Mom. For 1 second, I expected exactly what I had told her not to send. Brittany says. Instead, the message read, I'm going to check on your sister tonight. I know that is my choice, not your responsibility. I heard what you said. I read it twice. It was not enough to undo anything. But it was the first time I could remember Mom telling me what she had chosen without using Brittany as an explanation. I typed back, thank you. Then I put the phone face down. Because for the first time in a very long time, I did not need to know what Brittany was saying about me next. For the first week after that conversation, my parents were almost too careful with me. Dad texted before calling. Mom asked whether it was a good time, instead of simply launching into whatever family crisis had happened that morning. Neither of them mentioned Brittany, unless I asked, which I did not. The quiet should have felt peaceful. Instead, it felt like walking through a room where someone had just broken a glass, and everyone was waiting to see who would step on the pieces. Daniel noticed it before I said anything. You keep checking your phone every time it buzzes, he said one evening. I always check my phone. You read client emails during dinner. You do not stare at your mother's name for 5 seconds before opening a text. I set the phone face down. I'm waiting for the correction. What correction? The part where they decide they apologize too much. He understood immediately. For years, that was how family conflict worked. Someone would say something unusually honest. Everyone would feel terrible for a day, and then the story would be softened until nothing meaningful had actually happened. Brittany had not lied. She had been emotional. Dad had not ignored me. He had tried to keep peace. Mom had not favored Brittany. They were simply closer. Eventually, I would be told that continuing to care about the original problem was almost worse than whatever had caused it. This time, I did not wait for the family to decide what the rules were going to become. I called Mom and Dad the following Sunday and asked if they had 30 minutes. Dad said, "That sounds official." It is. Mom looked nervous when the video call connected. I had written nothing down. I did not want to sound like I was reading company policy to my parents, even though part of me would have found that comforting. I want to make sure we all understand what changes now, I said. Mom frowned. Changes? Yes. We apologized. I know, Dad said. Aaron, maybe let her finish. That was new enough that I noticed. I continued. I'm not cutting either of you off. Mom's shoulders relaxed immediately, but I am not going back to how things were. The relief disappeared. Dad asked, "What does that mean in practical terms?" That was exactly the question I wanted. If you have a problem with me, call me. He nodded. If you think I said something, ask me what I said. Do not ask Brittany what I meant. Mom looked down. If Brittany tells you I'm angry, selfish, jealous, cruel, busy, ungrateful, or secretly plotting the collapse of Western civilization, you do not call me to respond to her version. Dad's mouth twitched. Mom did not smile. I continued. If she says she has a screenshot, you ask for the full conversation. What if she doesn't have it? Mom asked. Then you don't treat the screenshot as the entire truth. Dad nodded again. And I'm not going to carry messages between you and Brittany either. If she has something to say to me, she can say it herself. Mom said, what if she isn't ready? Then she isn't ready. You two can't avoid each other forever. I'm not avoiding her. You haven't called her. I'm not required to call someone because she is upset that I discovered she fabricated things I said. Mom flinched. Dad looked at her. She took a breath and started again. I'm trying to understand what this looks like. That's what I'm telling you. I could hear the edge coming into my voice, so I softened it deliberately. I'm not asking you to choose between your daughters. I'm asking you to stop making me responsible for the relationship you have with the other one. Mom was quiet. Dad said, "Okay, that should have been the end of it." Then Mom asked, "So, are we allowed to call you?" I stared at her. "Mom, I'm asking." "Yes, you are allowed to call me." "Visit?" "Yes." "Invite you to dinner?" "Yes." She looked frustrated. "Then I don't understand why you keep talking about access like we're strangers." Because the word bothered her. I had known it would. "It means you don't automatically get every part of my life just because you're my parents. We never said we did. You acted like you did." Dad rubbed his chin. Mom said, "This feels like punishment." "No, it does. I understand that it feels that way. Then what is the difference?" I had thought about that question more than she knew. Punishment would be me trying to make you hurt because I'm hurt. That is not what I'm doing. "What are you doing?" "Changing what I trust you with." She looked wounded. I kept going because stopping would have made the truth easier but not clearer. "For years I told you things about work, Daniel, holidays, plans, arguments, and private decisions. Some of those things ended up becoming conversations with Brittany. Some of those conversations came back to me distorted. I didn't tell her everything." "I know." "Then why?" "Because I don't know what stayed with you and what became family discussion." Mom opened her mouth. Dad spoke before she could. "She has a point." Mom turned toward him. He looked uncomfortable saying it, but he did not take it back. "If Erin doesn't know what stayed private," he said, "we can't expect her to keep sharing the same way." Mom's eyes filled. I hated seeing that. What I hated more was the instinct that followed. I wanted to reassure her that nothing would really change. That instinct had kept me in the same role for years. So I did not. I said, "This isn't punishment. This is what our relationship looks like after years of you choosing not to hear me." Mom looked away from the camera. Dad was quiet for several seconds. Then he said, "That's fair." Mom gave him a look. He sighed. "I didn't say it feels good." That made me almost smile. The conversation ended without agreement on every detail, which was probably the healthiest thing about it. Mom still thought I was being too formal. Dad thought I was probably overcorrecting. I thought they both wanted the comfort of repair before they had lived through the inconvenience of rebuilding trust. But at least the rules were spoken out loud. 3 days later, Dad tested one without meaning to. He called while I was working. "Do you have a minute? For you or for Brittany?" He paused. "For me." "Okay." He told me Mom was upset because Brittany had skipped a family dinner and had not answered her phone for several hours. Dad had apparently spent the afternoon listening to Mom worry, and Brittany later complained that nobody respected her space. I waited for the reason I had been called. Dad said, "I was wondering if you could just—" He stopped. I could almost hear the old sentence assembling itself. "Could you just talk to her? Could you just make this easier? Could you just be the bigger person?" Desaihu. "No." I smiled slightly. "No what?" "No, I was about to do it again." "Do what?" "Ask you to fix something because I don't want to deal with it." I leaned back in my chair. "That is exactly what you were about to do." "I know." "Impressive. Don't enjoy this too much." "I'm trying." He laughed once. Then he said, "Never mind. I'll handle it." That call mattered more to me than his apology had. Apologies describe what someone understands after the fact. Habits show what they actually do next. Dad had caught himself before I had to stop him. I did not expect perfection. I did expect repetition to eventually become a choice again. Mom moved differently. She wanted a big repair. About 2 weeks after the wedding, she called with what she described as an idea. Those words always worried me. "I thought we could all have dinner next weekend," she said. "All?" "You, Daniel, your father, me, Brittany." "No." There was silence. "You didn't even think about it." "I did." Quickly. "Aiden, I'm not sitting at a table so everyone can apologize and pretend we've reached the end. That isn't what I said. What happens at this dinner? We talk. We have been talking. Together. That is exactly what I don't want." "Why?" "Because Brittany is going to cry. You're going to feel guilty. Dad is going to want everyone to calm down. I'm going to be asked what I need in order to forgive her. Then everyone will go home exhausted and decide the problem has been dealt with. That's cynical. It's specific. Mom sighed. I just want my family back. There was the sentence. I had known it was coming. What family? She went quiet. The family we had. The one where Brittany spoke for me? That's not fair. The one where Dad asked me to let things go because she reacted worse? Iden. The one where you thought my independence meant I loved you less? She stopped arguing. I lowered my voice. I don't want that family back. Mom sounded hurt. Then what do you want? A different one. How do we get there if no one is willing to sit in the same room? By changing how we behave when we're not performing reconciliation for each other. She disliked that word too. Performing. Yes. You think an apology from your sister would be a performance? I don't know what it would be. That's the point. I had not spoken to Brittany since the call where she admitted changing the screenshot. If she wanted to apologize, she knew my number. She did not need Mom to arrange the lighting. Mom finally said, "So no dinner." "No dinner. I think you're making this harder." "Maybe." She seemed surprised. I continued. "But making something easy is how we kept getting back to the same place." She did not agree. But she stopped trying to schedule it. Brittany contacted me the next morning. Not to apologize. Of course not. Her message began. "You got what you wanted." I stared at it for a few seconds before opening the rest. "Ryan is gone. Mom and Dad think I'm a liar. Everyone is questioning everything I say. Congratulations." I read it twice. The old version of me would have answered every accusation separately. Ryan made his own decision. Mom and Dad saw the evidence. "You did lie. Everyone is questioning you because..." Instead I typed, "No, I wanted you to stop speaking for me." She replied immediately, "That is such a lie." I almost laughed at the choice of phrase. Then another message came. "You have spent your entire life acting like you're better than me, and now you finally got everyone on your side." I typed, "There shouldn't have been sides." 3 dots appeared. "You destroyed my relationship." I answered, "Ryan made his own decision." She wrote, "Because of you." I stared at the screen. Then I thought of something Ryan had said. "She kept talking about your meaning like it belonged to her." I had spent years arguing about whether Brittany's interpretation of me was correct. I did not have to interpret her back. I wrote, "If you want to talk about something you did to me, I'm willing to read it. I'm not arguing about decisions Ryan or Mom or Dad made." She sent another paragraph. I did not answer. Then another. I read it once. Still no apology. Still no acknowledgement. Only a rearrangement of blame. I put the phone down. Daniel looked up from the other end of the couch. "Brittany?" "Yes." "Productive?" "No." "You seem calm." I finally realized something. "What?" "I don't have to win the conversation." He nodded. "That seems expensive." "How many years did it take to learn?" 38. "Worth it." The practical changes with my parents came quietly after that. Before everything happened, Mom and I had talked almost every week. She knew when Daniel and I were choosing furniture, when I was negotiating a difficult client contract, where we were thinking about going for a long weekend. Dad called when he needed help comparing insurance paperwork, choosing software, finding a contractor, or figuring out why something on his phone had disappeared. None of those things made me a martyr. They were ordinary family habits. But ordinary access had depended on ordinary trust. So I stopped offering details automatically. When Mom asked how married life was, I said, "Good." Not coldly. Just without the 20-minute story that would have followed before. When Dad called because he could not remember where he had saved a document, I told him where to look instead of immediately logging into the shared account and fixing it. When Daniel's parents invited us to dinner one Saturday, we went. Normally, I would have mentioned it to Mom because she liked knowing our weekend plans. This time, I did not. She found out afterward when I casually said we had eaten with them. "Oh," she said. That single syllable carried more than I wanted to unpack. "We had a nice time." "You didn't tell me you were going." "I didn't know I needed to." "You don't." There was a pause. Then Mom added, "I just used to know things like that." I almost apologized. Instead, I said, "I know." She heard the difference. To her credit, she did not turn it into a fight. Dad seemed to understand faster. One evening, he asked how a client project had gone. I said it was finished. That's all I get? For now. He nodded. Okay. Then he changed the subject. That was new. My parents were learning that access was not the same thing as love. I was learning it too. I could love them and still decline a question. I could answer Mom's call without explaining every detail of my week. I could care about Dad without becoming the solution to every inconvenience. I could refuse to speak to Brittany without campaigning against her. None of that required anger. That was the part my family had always misunderstood. A boundary did not have to be delivered with a slammed door to be real. Almost 3 weeks after the wedding, Mom called one evening while Daniel and I were cleaning up after dinner. I looked at the screen. Daniel raised an eyebrow. You want privacy? No. Stay. I answered. Hi, Mom. Hey. Her voice sounded different. Nervous, but not upset. Everything okay? Yes. A pause. Then she said, I need to tell you something. My body tensed automatically. I waited for the next words. Brittany says, they did not come. Mom took a breath. And I'm going to tell you what I think, she said, without telling you what Brittany thinks first. I leaned against the kitchen counter. For the first time in weeks, I did not brace myself for someone else's version of the conversation. Okay, I said. I'm listening. Mom was quiet for a few seconds after I told her I was listening. Then she said, I realized something today that I should have understood years ago. I did not answer. She continued. I treated Brittany needing me like proof that she loved me more. The sentence was so direct that I almost looked at Daniel to make sure I had heard it correctly. Mom kept going before I could respond. She called more. She came over more. She asked what I thought about everything. Clothes, work, Ryan, dinners, arguments. You didn't. I called. I know. There was no defensiveness in her voice this time. You called. You came to birthdays. You came for holidays. You helped when we actually needed something. But you didn't need me to make every decision for you, and I turned that into distance. I leaned against the counter. You thought I didn't value family. Yes, and Brittany did. Yes. The honesty hurt, but differently now. It no longer felt like I was trying to drag a confession out of her. Mom said, that was unfair to you. I closed my eyes for a moment. Thank you for saying it plainly. I don't expect you to tell me it's okay. Good. She gave a sad little laugh. That was very you. I'm trying not to apologize for that anymore. I know. We talked for another 10 minutes. Nothing dramatic. Mom did not ask me to forgive her. She did not tell me Brittany had suffered enough. She did not explain how difficult motherhood was, or ask me to imagine being in her position. For once, she stayed with what she had done. That mattered. Dad took longer. About a week later, he asked me to meet him for lunch. I almost declined because work was busy, but he rarely asked to see me alone unless something needed fixing, and this time he specifically said, I don't need help with anything. That was enough to make me curious. We met at a small restaurant near my office. Dad spent the first 10 minutes talking about traffic, a baseball game, and a contractor who had apparently committed some unforgivable crime against cabinet doors. Then he put down his fork. I've been thinking about what you said. That sounds dangerous. He ignored me. About being reasonable. I stopped smiling. Dad looked uncomfortable, which told me he had rehearsed this and still hated every word. I used it against you. I waited. I told myself you could handle more. You already said that. I know. I didn't understand the rest of it when I said it. He looked down. I thought being strong meant you didn't need protecting in the same way Brittany did. I felt my throat tighten. Dad continued. When she got upset, I tried to stop it. When you got upset, I expected you to get over it. That's accurate. I thought I was treating you like an adult. Sometimes you were. He looked at me. And sometimes you were just giving me the bill because I wouldn't throw it back at you. He nodded. That too. I did not enjoy seeing him ashamed. That surprised me. For years I had imagined what it would feel like if Dad finally understood. I thought I would feel vindicated. Maybe even powerful. Mostly I felt sad that it had taken so long. Dad said. I kept thinking, Aaron can take it. I looked at him. I could. I know. That didn't mean I should have had to. He nodded slowly. No, that was enough. He did not say favoritism again. He had already said it once. What mattered now was that he understood the mechanism. For a while after that, things with my parents became almost boring. That was a compliment. Mom called and told me about her garden, without mentioning Brittany. Dad asked whether Daniel and I wanted to come over for lunch, and accepted no when we already had plans. Nobody asked me to repair anything. Then the family system started doing something predictable. It found the person who had always wanted to be in the middle. Brittany. At first, from what Mom later told me, Brittany seemed to like it. Mom called her whenever Aunt Carol was upset about something. Dad asked her to help him figure out a new phone app. A cousin wanted someone to coordinate a birthday dinner. Mom needed someone to pick up a prescription while she was already across town. Dad had a package issue. An uncle misunderstood a text. Nothing huge. Nothing that would make Brittany a martyr. Just dozens of ordinary little demands that families distribute across whoever is available. For years, Brittany had made herself the person who always knew everything. Now everyone assumed she wanted to keep knowing everything. The irony was almost too neat. I did not create it. That was important to me. I did not tell Mom to call Brittany. I did not send Dad's questions to her. I did not secretly arrange responsibilities, so she would become overwhelmed. I simply stopped automatically absorbing my share of things that had never actually belonged to me. The space filled itself. A month after the wedding, Mom called me one afternoon. She sounded tired. Can I ask you something? Sure. Did your father ever call you 6 times because he couldn't find a password? I laughed. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? What would that have accomplished? I would have been less annoyed when he did it to Brittany. I smiled. What happened? Mom hesitated. Nothing major. That phrase in my family usually meant something mildly entertaining had happened. Mom, she snapped at him. I stayed quiet. She had agreed to help him with something, then forgot. Your father called twice. She told him she was busy. Then I called because she was supposed to bring something over. And? Mom Sahil. She said, I can't rearrange everything every time you need something. I did not speak. The sentence landed with almost absurd precision. For years, Brittany had used variations of that line to describe me. Erin always acts like family interrupts her life. Erin thinks her schedule matters more. Erin treats helping us like a burden. Now Brittany had said the thing herself. Not because she was evil. Because being available to everyone all the time was exhausting. Mom continued. I didn't say anything at first. What did you think? She was quiet. I thought about all the times Brittany told me you said things like that. I leaned back in my chair. And I realized maybe some of them were things she felt too. That was closer to the truth. People are often very skilled at assigning their own resentment to someone else. I said. She's allowed to be tired. I know. She's allowed to say no. I know. The problem was never that she felt overwhelmed. Mom understood what I meant. The problem was that she used those feelings to define you. Yes. Mom Sahil. I wish I had understood that before. So do I. There was no point pretending otherwise. A few days later, Dad told me another piece. He had asked Brittany to help coordinate a small family dinner because Mom was tired of chasing everyone's schedules. Brittany agreed. Then 2 relatives changed times. Someone added another guest. A cousin wanted a different restaurant. By the 3rd phone call, Brittany had apparently said, Why does everything in this family become my problem? Dad told me the story cautiously. I think he expected me to laugh. I did not. What did you say? I almost told her to stop being selfish. I raised my eyebrows. Almost. I caught myself. Growth. Don't. I smiled. Dad continued. I told her she didn't have to organize it if she didn't want to. That seems reasonable. She said she had already told everyone she would. Then she can either do it or tell them she changed her mind. Dad looked amused. You make that sound simple. It is simple. Family is never simple. Family likes making simple things complicated. He laughed. Then his face became more serious. She blamed you. That did not surprise me. What did she say? That you stepped back and dumped everything on her. There it was. A new narrative waiting to be born. I did not even feel angry. What did you say? Dad looked slightly embarrassed. I told her you didn't ask her to take anything. That was all. One sentence. But it mattered because it meant the old mechanism had failed. Brittany offered an explanation. Dad did not automatically accept it. He checked causality. I had stepped back. That did not mean I had assigned my former role to her. There was a difference. Mom made the same distinction a few days later. Brittany apparently complained that everyone expected too much from her now because I had abandoned the family. Mom told her, "Aaron didn't ask you to do any of this." Brittany became furious. "How would I know?" Mom told me later. "She said I was taking your side again. What did you do?" I told her I wasn't taking anyone's side. I was saying what actually happened. I smiled. "That sounds familiar." "I know." There was a pause. Then Mom said, "She hung up on me. You survived." "Barely." I laughed. It would have been easy to enjoy Brittany's frustration. I would be lying if I said there was no satisfaction in seeing my parents stop accepting her version automatically. There was, but I did not want her life destroyed. I did not want her miserable forever. I wanted the one thing she had denied me for years. Reality, without editing. If Brittany was generous, let people see it. If she was selfish, let people see that too. If she was tired, impatient, kind, insecure, loving, controlling, funny, angry, or difficult, let those things belong to her, just as mine should have belonged to me. The consequences with Ryan remained. He did not come back. I heard through Mom that Brittany had tried several times to reopen the conversation. Ryan stayed polite but firm. He did not want to rebuild a relationship with someone who still argued that changing another person's words was acceptable if the meaning felt true. That loss belonged to Brittany, not to me, not to my wedding, not to some rivalry she could turn into a story. To her decisions. Extended family changed too, though not dramatically. Nobody held a meeting and announced that Brittany could never be trusted again. Real families rarely work that way. Instead, people started asking questions. When Brittany said, "Aaron told Mom," someone would ask, "Did Aaron tell you that herself?" When she said, "Dad thinks," Aunt Carol once replied, "Then Dad can tell me." The first time Mom told me that, I laughed so hard I had to put the phone down. It was such a small correction. But Brittany's influence had always lived inside those small assumptions. Once people stopped handing them to her automatically, she had much less power. One Saturday in July, Mom invited Daniel and me to lunch. I considered it for a while, before accepting. Brittany was not invited. Not because Mom was choosing me over her. She had eaten with Brittany 2 days earlier. This was simply our visit. That distinction mattered. Lunch was awkward for the first 20 minutes. Mom overcooked chicken because she was nervous. Dad complained about the grill. Daniel wisely talked about baseball. Eventually, the tension eased. Nobody apologized again. Nobody reviewed the screenshots. Nobody mentioned Ryan. For the first time in years, I sat at my parents' table, without feeling that an invisible version of me had arrived before I did. After lunch, Dad went outside with Daniel. Mom and I stayed in the kitchen. She dried a plate. I talked to Brittany yesterday. I looked at her. Mom stopped herself. Then she smiled faintly. That sounded like I was about to tell you what she said. It did. I'm learning. Slowly. Wood. Accurate. She laughed. Then she became serious. She's having a hard time. I believe that. I'm not asking you to do anything. I waited. Mom said, "I just wanted you to know I'm trying not to turn her pain into your responsibility." That was more important than she realized. "Thank you." She put the plate away. "Do you think she understands what she did?" "I think she understands what she lost." Mom looked at me. "That isn't the same." "No." "Do you think she ever will?" "I don't know." And for once, not knowing did not feel like a problem I had to solve. A week later, Mom called after another argument with Brittany. This time, she did not start with the argument. She asked how Daniel and I were doing. We talked for 15 minutes about ordinary things. Before hanging up, she hesitated. Then she asked, "Can I ask you something difficult?" "Yes." "Do you think we can ever be a family again?" The question would have terrified me a few months earlier. I would have heard obligation inside it. Fix us. Come back. Make this normal. Now I heard something else. Uncertainty. I looked around my kitchen. Daniel was at the counter cutting vegetables badly enough that I was considering intervention. My phone was in my hand. No one was speaking through anyone else. I thought about the family we had been, Brittany in the middle. Mom translating concern into pressure, Dad translating avoidance into peace, me translating endurance into strength. I did not want that structure repaired. I wanted it gone. So I answered honestly, not the one we were. By the time I started telling this story, a little more than 3 months had passed since my wedding. Daniel and I had been married long enough for the last thank you card to leave our dining room table, long enough for my dress to come back from the cleaner and disappear into the back of the closet, and long enough for the second cake to stop being the first thing I remembered when someone asked how the wedding had gone. For a while, I had been afraid Brittany would take that day from me in the same way she had taken so many conversations from me, by changing what mattered until the altered version became the only one anyone remembered. But memory turned out to be harder to steal once I stopped letting someone else narrate it. When I thought about my wedding by August, I remembered Daniel waiting for me at the end of the aisle, blinking too many times because he had promised he would not cry. I remembered my college roommate taking off her shoes halfway through the reception and somehow convincing 6 other women to do the same. I remembered the lemon layer of our cake, the one Daniel had insisted on, and how he leaned toward me before we cut it and whispered that if I stabbed him with the decorative knife, our marriage would be historically short. Brittany had taken a scene. She had not taken the wedding, and realizing that was one of the first signs that the rest of my life no longer belonged to her version either. Ryan never went back to her. I knew that because Mom eventually told me, but only after asking whether I wanted to know. That question mattered more than she probably realized. Before everything happened, Mom would have considered Brittany's relationship status, family information, and therefore automatically mine. She would have opened a call with, "Your sister tried to talk to Ryan again," then expected me to carry the emotional weight of whatever came next. This time she said, "There's something about Brittany and Ryan. Do you want to hear it?" I said yes, because by then I was curious without feeling responsible. Mom told me Brittany had contacted him several times after the breakup. She apologized for how things looked, tried to convince him the altered messages were just family misunderstandings, and at one point argued that every couple had things they interpreted differently. Ryan remained polite, but he did not reopen the relationship. The only thing he ever said to me directly afterward was that he could not build a marriage with someone who believed another person's words were editable if she thought her version captured the real meaning better. He did not sound angry when he said it. That probably hurt Brittany more than anger would have. Anger leaves room for negotiation. Calm finality does not. I never celebrated their breakup, and I never pretended I was heartbroken about it either. Both reactions would have required making their relationship about me. And after spending years being blamed for things I had not done, I was done volunteering for central roles in other people's consequences. Ryan had loved Brittany. He had planned a private proposal 2 weeks after my wedding. He had picked up the ring, had it resized and engraved, asked my father for his blessing, and built a future around a woman he believed he knew. Then he discovered that one of the defining stories she had told him about her family was partly manufactured. He asked questions. She justified herself. He made a decision. That loss belonged to her actions and his boundaries. I did not cause it by existing, by getting married first, or by asking people to compare screenshots to originals. The distinction felt almost ridiculously obvious once I could finally see it clearly. Brittany lost something else that was quieter than Ryan, and, in some ways, more important to her. People stopped treating her as the automatic source of truth. Nobody held a family meeting and announced that Brittany could never be trusted again. Nobody removed her from group chats, banned her from birthdays, or declared her permanently exiled. Real families usually do not collapse with one theatrical vote. They change through tiny habits. If Brittany said, "Erin told Mom," someone might ask, "Did Erin tell you that herself?" If she said, "Dad thinks," Dad increasingly answered for himself. If she reported that one cousin was furious with another, Aunt Carol occasionally called the cousin instead of accepting Brittany's interpretation. Those questions would have seemed painfully ordinary in a healthier family. In ours, they changed the balance of power because Brittany's influence had lived inside the assumption that her summary was close enough to reality that nobody needed the source. At first, she hated those questions. Mom told me that Brittany complained everyone was suddenly treating her like a liar. When Mom repeated that to me, I asked, "Are they calling her a liar?" Mom thought about it and said no. "Then what are they doing?" I asked. She admitted people were checking things. I said, "That sounds like a consequence." Mom sighed, and for a second I heard the old instinct in it, the one that wanted me to soften everything because Brittany was hurting. But she only said, "I know." That small correction mattered. Mom could feel sorry for Brittany without making me responsible for relieving the discomfort Brittany had earned. The changes with my parents were not dramatic either. They were uneven, sometimes awkward, and much more convincing because of that. Mom still slipped. Once she called and started, "Brittany feels like you're shutting her out because," then stopped herself so abruptly that I laughed. "What?" she asked. I said, "You heard it too." She groaned. I did. I asked what Brittany felt I was doing, and Mom paused before saying, "Actually, no. If she wants you to know, she can tell you." That was exactly the kind of sentence I had wanted for years. Not because it proved Mom was suddenly perfect, but because she had finally begun noticing the moment she stepped into the middle before I had to drag her back out. Dad's mistakes were almost funnier because he recognized them with visible annoyance. A family dinner got complicated when someone changed a time and another relative became upset. Dad called me and started, "Could you just be the bigger?" Then stopped. I waited. He closed his eyes on the video call and said, "I hate you right now." I told him he did not. He said, "I hate that I can hear myself." I smiled and told him that was progress. 3 months earlier, he would have finished the sentence, asked me to smooth everything over, and then acted surprised when I said the request itself was the problem. Now he was catching the pattern before I paid for it. That mattered more to me than any apology he had given. Our relationship was still smaller than it had been before. Mom no longer knew every detail of my week. Dad no longer assumed that competence automatically made me available. I stopped telling Mom things simply because I was used to telling her. I told her what I wanted to share. Some weeks that was a lot. Some weeks it was almost nothing. At first, she noticed every missing detail. If I mentioned after the fact that Daniel and I had eaten with his parents, she would say, "You didn't tell me you were going." I would answer, "I didn't know I needed to." She would go quiet, then usually say, "You don't." The disappointment was real, and I had to learn that real disappointment did not automatically mean I had done something wrong. For most of my adult life, Mom being hurt had felt like a task placed on my desk. Now, sometimes it was simply her feeling, and she could have it without assigning me a solution. Dad adjusted faster to the practical side. Before everything happened, if he could not find a password, compare an insurance plan, understand a contractor estimate, or figure out why an app had changed, he often called me because he knew I would solve it efficiently. I did not mind helping him. The problem was how quickly "Aaron can handle this" had become "Aaron should handle this." After the wedding, I started helping only when I actually wanted to. If Dad asked where a document was, I told him where to look instead of logging into the account myself. If he complained about a contractor, quote, I asked what he thought instead of immediately reviewing it. The first few times he looked at me as if I had suddenly become less useful. Then he learned. Competence did not make me the family's unpaid operations department. Some weekends Daniel and I saw my parents. Some weekends we saw his. Some weekends we stayed home, ordered food, and did nothing remotely productive. I used to explain those choices to Mom. Not because she demanded formal permission, but because her disappointment always felt like something I should prevent. By August, I had stopped pre-managing other adults' feelings. That sounded simple when I said it out loud. Living it was harder. Boundaries are easiest when you are furious. Anger gives them structure. Keeping them after the anger fades is where you find out whether they are actually values or just reactions. In July, Mom and Dad invited Daniel and me over for dinner. Brittany was not there. That did not mean they had chosen me over her. Mom had seen Brittany the day before, and Dad had helped her with something earlier that week. This was simply dinner with us. The distinction would have been almost impossible in my family before. Everything involving one sister had automatically meant something about the other. If Mom spent more time with Brittany, I was distant. If she called me for help, Brittany was more emotionally available. If I was invited somewhere without my sister, someone eventually worried about whether she would feel excluded. I was tired of every ordinary interaction carrying a hidden scoreboard. Dinner was ordinary enough that the ordinariness itself felt strange. Dad grilled too much food because he did not believe 4 adults could survive unless there were leftovers for 6. Mom insisted vegetables cooked in butter still counted as vegetables. Daniel and Dad argued about baseball while somehow agreeing on every relevant fact. Nobody mentioned the screenshots. Nobody mentioned Ryan. Nobody mentioned the second cake. I sat at my parents' table and realized that for the first time in years, I did not feel as if a second version of me had arrived before I did. There was no invisible accusation waiting to be explained. I was just there. After dinner, Dad and Daniel went outside while Mom and I stayed in the kitchen. She dried a plate, put it away, then turned toward me with the expression she used whenever she had decided she needed to say something difficult. I braced myself anyway. Old reactions take longer to disappear than old arguments. Mom said, "I want to apologize again." I told her she had already apologized. She said, "I know, but I don't think I said the part that matters clearly enough." I did not interrupt. "We favored Brittany," she said. She had said the word before, but this time it came without being dragged out by evidence, without Dad saying it first, without her immediately explaining what she meant by something softer. She looked directly at me. "We favored her because she stayed close and because she needed us more." I told myself that meant she cared more about the family. "I treated your independence like rejection. I stayed quiet because I knew there was more," Mom continued. "When Brittany called me all the time, asked my advice, came over constantly, I felt important. When you didn't need me to make decisions for you, I told myself you were pulling away. I made her dependence into proof of love and your competence into proof of distance." The words hit me harder than the word favoritism ever had. I had spent years defending individual actions. "I called you. I came to dinner. I picked Dad up. I remembered birthdays." I did not understand that Mom had been grading the relationship by how necessary she felt. She said, "And when Brittany brought me something that confirmed what I already thought about you, I wanted to believe it." That was the sentence I had not expected. Mom looked down. "I'm ashamed of that part," I asked. "More than being fooled?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because being fooled was something she did to me. The other part was something I did." I swallowed. She continued. "After the hospital screenshot, I knew enough to question her. Maybe not enough to know exactly what she was doing, but enough to stop treating everything she showed me as fact. I didn't because if she was lying, I would have had to admit I had already hurt you." There was no but after the sentence. No reminder that Brittany had been young. No explanation that parenting 2 daughters was difficult. No request that I acknowledge how much pressure Mom had been under. That mattered. I nodded. "Thank you." Her eyes filled, but she did not ask whether I forgave her. She simply dried another plate because apparently emotional accountability in my family now came with dish towels. Dad came back inside a few minutes later with Daniel. He heard the end of the conversation and said he had something he wanted to say too. I told him that if this was turning into a coordinated apology event, I was leaving. He rolled his eyes and said, "You really know how to receive growth." I told him I was trying. He sat across from me. "My part was different from your mother's." "I know. I didn't need Brittany to need me the way Linda did." Mom gave him a look. "I'm not criticizing you. You are a little. Fine. A little. I almost laughed. Then Dad became serious. My weakness was confrontation. That is not breaking news. No, but I understand it differently now. He folded his hands on the table. When Brittany got upset, I thought the fastest way back to peace was to go to the person who could calm down first. Me. Usually. And because I did calm down, you kept doing it. Yes. He looked uncomfortable saying the next part. I told myself I was treating you like an adult. Sometimes you were. And sometimes I was using the fact that you could handle something as an excuse to make you handle it. I looked at him. He continued. When you showed me contradictions, I kept thinking, Aaron can take this. Aaron won't blow up the whole family. Aaron will eventually move on. I could take it. I know. That didn't mean I should have had to. No. His answer came without resistance now. Dad said, when you tried to show me what was happening, I asked you to be the bigger person because confronting Brittany was harder. He looked down. That was favoritism too. I had imagined hearing those words from my father so many times that the reality should have felt larger. It did not. There was no rush of triumph, no sense that I had finally defeated him in an argument that had lasted years. There was relief. Not because I had been proven right, because I no longer had to prove that one thing. I believe you, I said. Dad looked up. That we're sorry? Yes. Mom asked the question he did not. But? I smiled slightly. You both really hate that word. Because there is always one coming. Dad said. There is. I looked between them. I believe you're sorry. I'm still not going back to what we were. Mom looked hurt, but not surprised. Dad asked, what does going forward look like? That was the right question. I pointed between us. This. Mom glanced around the kitchen. Dinner? Direct conversation. I said. You want to know what I think? Ask me. I answer. You are allowed to dislike my answer. You are not allowed to replace it with what Brittany thinks I really meant. Dad nodded. You don't ask Brittany to explain me. You don't ask me to explain her. Another nod. If something seems wrong, you check before deciding who I am. Mom looked down. And I'm not being pressured to reconcile with Brittany because a certain amount of time has passed. We understand, Dad said. Mom took longer. Then she nodded. I continued. If she wants to apologize to me someday, she can. If she doesn't, that is information too. Mom said, what if she never does? Then she never does. The answer hurt her. It no longer frightened me. I had spent too much time waiting for other people to become ready for honesty before allowing myself to move forward. Mom asked, do you think you'll ever forgive her? I don't know. That sounds harsh. It is honest. She accepted that. I told them trust could grow if their behavior stayed different. I also told them I would notice if it did not. They would probably make mistakes. So would I. I was still going to be blunt. I was still going to lose patience. I was probably going to say things better in my head than I said them out loud. The difference was that I would take responsibility for the things I actually said. I was not going to apologize for an edited version of myself ever again. That became one of the clearest lines I had drawn. Brittany and I remained largely apart. She never gave me the apology Mom had once wanted to arrange over dinner. For the first month, that bothered me more than I admitted. I thought after everything became undeniable, Brittany would eventually reach a point where even she could no longer defend what she had done. I imagined a message beginning with, I know I changed your words. I imagined her acknowledging Christmas. The hospital screenshot. Dad's procedure. The fake message about Ryan. The message never came. Instead, when she contacted me, it was usually framed around what had happened to her. Ryan left me. Everyone questions me now. Mom and Dad treat me differently. You got what you wanted. Eventually, I stopped waiting for the sentence I wanted. An apology forced by consequences would not necessarily be accountability. Brittany understood what she had lost. I was not sure she understood what she had done. That difference belonged to her. If she ever reached a place where she could say, without adding, but you, that she had changed my words and damaged my relationship with our parents, I would decide what to do with that then. I was not spending my life waiting at the door. The irony was that Brittany eventually got the position she had spent years protecting. She became the daughter my parents relied on most often for ordinary, day-to-day things. Mom called because she lived nearby. Dad asked her for errands because she was 10 minutes away. Relatives still contacted her about family plans because she had trained them to do it for years. The difference was that I had stopped standing on the other side, absorbing whatever she did not want to handle. For a while, Brittany seemed to enjoy being indispensable. Then she discovered the same thing every indispensable person eventually discovers. Being needed constantly is exhausting. She forgot a family errand she had agreed to do. Mom was disappointed. Dad called twice about something Brittany had promised to help with. She finally snapped, "I can't rearrange everything every time you need something." Months earlier, Mom would have heard that sentence and somehow found a way to compare it to me. This time she heard Brittany. Only Brittany. Later, Mom told me she had thought about all the times Brittany claimed I said things just like it. I told her, "Brittany is allowed to be tired. I know. She's allowed to say no. I know." The problem was never that feeling overwhelmed made someone bad. Mom nodded. The problem was she used those feelings to define you. Yes. Another time, Brittany complained that everything had become her responsibility because I had abandoned the family. Mom told her, "Aaron didn't ask you to take any of this on." Brittany accused her of taking my side. Mom replied, "I'm not taking a side. I'm saying what happened." That sentence might have been the clearest sign of change in my entire family. For years, stating what happened had been treated like choosing sides. Now at least one person understood the difference. I did not enjoy Brittany's frustration as much as I expected. There was some satisfaction. I would be lying if I said otherwise. But I did not want her destroyed. I wanted reality restored. If Brittany was loving, she could receive credit for being loving. If she was difficult, she could own being difficult. If she was overwhelmed, she could say she was overwhelmed. If she was generous, angry, frightened, controlling, funny, insecure, or selfish, those things could belong to her without requiring me to become their opposite. For years, Brittany had needed me to be the selfish daughter so she could be the devoted one. Once I stopped participating, she had to become a full person instead of a comparison. So did I. Looking back, I used to think the lesson was that I should have kept better records earlier. That was partly true. The original messages mattered. Mom's saved screenshots mattered. Dad remembering the full thread mattered. The wedding planning group existing on 6 different phones mattered. Without those things, Brittany might still be telling people our memories simply differed. Evidence gave me ground under my feet. But evidence did not solve the hardest part. It could show Mom that Brittany fabricated something. It could not force Mom to admit why she ignored warning signs. It could show Dad that he repeatedly pressured me to compromise. It could not make him stop using peace as an excuse. It could show Brittany that she changed my words. It could not make her understand why believing she knew what I really meant was not permission to rewrite me. Those parts required choices. Mom had to choose whether being a good mother meant defending her self-image or admitting she had favored one daughter. Dad had to choose whether avoiding conflict was still worth making someone else pay for it. Brittany had to choose whether controlling the story mattered more than honest relationships. And I had a choice too. For years, I thought I had to make people understand before I was allowed to move on. First I would explain, then they would see. Then they would admit I had been treated unfairly. Then I would finally have permission to step away from the role. I had the order backward. I could step away because something was unhealthy. They could decide whether they wanted to understand afterward. By August, Mom and I were talking more often again, but differently. Better in some ways because the conversations belonged to the two people actually having them. One afternoon, she texted about a cookout planned for the following weekend. "Your dad and I are thinking Saturday around 4. Does that work for you and Daniel?" I stared at the message longer than it deserved. There was no Brittany says. No. Your sister thinks. No, everyone decided. No interpretation. Just a question from my mother to me. I wrote back, 4 works. We'll bring dessert. She replied, perfect. See you then. That was it. No apology attached. No reference to the wedding. No declaration that our family had healed. I put my phone down and went back to work. A few minutes later, Daniel walked into my office and asked if everything was okay. Yeah. Family? Mom. He waited. I smiled. She asked me a question. He looked appropriately concerned. That sounds serious. You have no idea. He laughed. I looked at the phone once more before locking the screen. I did not know what my relationship with my parents would look like a year later. I did not know whether Brittany and I would ever repair ours. I did not know whether Mom would slip into old habits again, or whether Dad would someday ask me, out of pure muscle memory, to be the bigger person. Probably. People do not stop being themselves because one crisis exposed the cost. What mattered was that I was different too. The next time someone told me, "Brittany said you said," I would not defend myself against a sentence I had never spoken. I would not spend an hour proving my character. I would not beg anyone to remember who I was. I would ask one question. Did you ask me? And if the answer was no, that conversation would stop right there. When family conflict keeps repeating, stop relying on secondhand stories. Ask the person directly, compare facts, keep clear boundaries, and do not let guilt turn you into the permanent fixer. Love does not require accepting manipulation. Protect your voice, trust consistent actions, and subscribe for more family stories like this.